pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Emergency exits are to my right behind the town attorney and also the door you came in. Roll, please.
Councilwoman Samoji? Here. Councilman Morris?
Here.
Councilman Gutierrez?
Here.
Councilwoman Doyle? Here. And Supervisor Purdy?
Here. Make a motion to go into executive session for pending litigation with the town attorney, and the town clerk is excused.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that's at 6:05. We'll see you guys at 7.
Public comment?
Are we back?
Yes, we're back.
Okay, so I need the information. So,
How you doing?
good.
Could you speak into the microphone and identify yourself, please?
Yeah, how you doing?
But that
Tom
was
Wheeler.
it.
I live in Wassake. I have a couple questions. That's it. I just don't understand why, like in Wassake, the ball field, it's not getting taken care of the right way. I understand you may forget a couple times. You know, I didn't say nothing 2 weeks ago when it was 2 foot high.
I think you're talking about where the
playground set, yes.
I know, the playground set, that set is going to be removed.
Right, but
But it's
meantime-
right now, yes, and
meantime,
the
it's-
maintenance person, I spoke to him, and they're going to go down this weekend and cut all the grass.
No, the
around
grass
there.
is cut. It's just
Not
a
the
weed
grass, the weeds. He's
All
going to
right.
go down and do the weed whacking this weekend.
whack. All right. The other thing, a couple weeks ago, or I think a month ago or whatnot, you guys talked about redoing the parks and taking down the ball stop down behind the Wassake. I just don't understand why we're going to take all that down over a couple of pieces that are broke. I went down there, I looked at it, $6 is going to fix the piece for the ball, the backstop. You know, I don't understand why. There's a couple times, you know, when my kids didn't get to play baseball because it was packed over here, but yet we never used the Wassake field.
Well, we just wanted to fix it so it was safer, because I think is it leaning or it's doing something?
No, just the top is broke a little
It's
bit.
broken,
It's
yeah.
concreted in, it's not gonna go nowhere. But like, the last 5-6 years, there's never been a baseball game down there. I've lived in Wassake my whole life. You
Well,
know,
I think
we
the
used to
firemen,
play-
yeah, the firemen
Right, the fire
have used
company,
it.
right, would use it, but like, I don't understand why we can't use the town to have the kids go down. So, you know, Wassake is a nice place. That's a beautiful park down there. You know?
So if we can fix that, we'll fix it then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be saving money if we just fixed it instead of ripping it down.
Now, what did you say we would have to do to fix it?
Yeah, it's 2 of the upper pieces that are broke off.
Yeah, because they're kind of
Right, it
crooked,
makes
yeah.
it fall down a little bit, but I mean,
Okay.
it's like $3 a piece, a couple bolts and be done with. That's that, right? And then you guys talked about camera security for the Amenia field. Are we gonna do that for Wassake also?
The only place that there's security in the Amenia field is at the concession stand area, because that's been broken into.
Or, no, I thought on a couple of meetings ago or a meeting ago, you guys said
Yeah,
that.
we don't have them on the fields.
But you might be looking into that, right? I thought that's what I heard before. There might be more
we had-
cameras, or there might be a cop that shows up there once in a while, or...
Well, actually,
right?
the sheriff drives through both parks. I mean, since we had the problem with the vandalism down in the Wassaic Park when somebody went in there and did wheelies
Right.
or whatever, the problem at the time is that vandals had torn down the sign
Right.
that had the actual hours of the park.
Yeah.
So we had a new sign made, and we had it put up. So now that there is an actual sign there that says the hours that the park is open and closed, the sheriff goes down there and checks it out.
Okay. So, like I said, I don't know, but I guess I heard before, a couple meetings ago, that you guys are going to redo the Wassake Park?
Yes, we're,
When about
actually, I applied for a grant before from the county, and we didn't get that one.
Okay.
So there was another, it's called a consolidated funding application. You can apply for a lot of grants, all different grants at the same time. So we applied for another one from the Parks and Recreation,
Okay.
state Parks and Recreation. We actually got a plan from Parkitect who designed the park that's in back of the town hall. So we have a whole plan, we have the price and everything, so we included that in it.
Oh, okay, great.
So we, and there is also funds in the Recreation Capital Project Fund that can be used for. But what the plan is, you know, when the highway department isn't crazy trying to do paving and everything else on the road, is to actually take up the playground equipment that's there, because number one, it's not ADA compliant, and most of it is more like a jungle gym.
Right.
I mean, there's no slide for the kids.
Right.
And,
They took that
and
out
it's,
of it.
and the other thing is that Parkitect told us is that it's more for older children. So what we're looking to do, you know, there's like a fence between the field, is to maybe move that or take that down. So have the, where the existing equipment is, have the older children there, and then right next to it, more toward the field, have something for the toddlers.
Right, but we're not gonna take, I mean, I don't know, I was just asking, we're not gonna take the field out, right?
No.
Oh, all right.
Oh, absolutely not. We weren't going to take the field out. The only thing we're trying to do is, you know, make the park safer.
Right.
And the problem with the weeds keep growing up, I mean, we've tried putting more, you know, material down, you know, cut it all down, put the material down, you know, put something else underneath the material. But the problem is, the way it was put in, the way Parkitect explained it to me, was that there was no stone put underneath it. So there's no proper drainage, which is why no matter what you do, the weeds are going to come up. I mean, we've been fighting the weeds for a couple years now.
Right.
And they won.
Right. No,
But it's not really good equipment for the children to be on. I mean, it's not unsafe. Nobody's going to get hurt if they go, you know, go use it. But it's old, and it, you know, it really needs to be replaced. So that's the plan we have to get something better. One of the other things they recommended was that, which we did, was to paint the, I guess they're the monkey bars, or I'm not sure what you call it, the climbing apparatus down there. So we got special paint and painted that, and we replaced the chains. We replaced the toddler seat, because we were told the toddler seat that was there had straps on it, and those are considered unsafe. So that's why we replaced the toddler seat. So we're doing everything we can with, you know, with the pieces that we're going to keep to make it better. And then we kind of have a whole plan for it. One of the other things we need to do is to change the grade into the park, because it's not ADA compliant. We also have to put a handicap parking place up there. And we're going to be working with the Housatonic Valley Association to actually put a path from like where the swings are to the stream, so people with, you know, problems with mobility would be able to go to the stream and fish. Because right now, the only way you can really get there is over the rocks, which
Sounds
kind of
very
limits
expensive.
people. What?
It sounds very expensive.
Well, that's why I applied for a grant. But we do have
What
quite...
what if we don't, I'm not trying to cut you up, but what if
No,
we
it's
don't
okay.
get the grant? Are
We
we
do-
not going to fix Wasake Park? Is that the?
No.
Is that the goal?
No, we might have to not do all of those things, but we still are going to fix the park. One of the things that was established several years ago is a capital project fund for recreation. Now, the money that we get in from our cable franchise, we get X amount of dollars every month, you know, from the towers we have for cable. And $1,200 a month goes into a fund for recreation. And that's been building up. I think it's probably around $70,000, $80,000 right now. So even if we don't get the grant, we are still going to put improvements in the park. It may be on a little smaller scale, and then as the money builds up, we can add pieces.
Right. All right. Thank you. I have one more thing. I don't know, so I'm just going to ask.
Okay.
You know how we pay people to mow and we pay people to do the sidewalks in the winter? Isn't it your responsibility, if you want a piece of sidewalk in front of your house, it's your responsibility to clean it?
It is technically.
Yes,
So
technically.
if that's the case, then why aren't we finding people that don't do it so we can save the town more money? And then if it wasn't, then my thing was, why can't we hire a little bit of summer help? You know, Megan, I mean, I don't know if Megan, you know, would need help, but, you know, the initial payment would be a lot to buy a mower and a weed whacker, but over a couple of years, it would pay for itself. You would, you know, I guess you wouldn't have to give them insurance because it'd be 32 hours a week. You know what I mean? I'm just looking for the long term. You know, I mean,
Okay.
that's all. I like this town.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming in. I especially appreciate you telling me how to fix the backstop on the baseball field.
All right, go ahead.
I was just curious if you actually had a time frame and if you actually applied for these grants or you're...
We applied for them, and the grant had to be in July 26th.
Okay,
And we'll find out in December whether or not we got it.
okay,
And even if we don't get it in December, we will plan some kind of upgrade for the park
okay. Thank you.
for the spring.
I was glad to see the noise law back on the agenda. I unfortunately missed the last meeting where the shooter appeared with his lawyer, and I thought that might have just deep sixed the whole process. The last time I was here, though, the gentleman who owns the property at the top of the hill or mountain opposite me said that he felt singled out and that he thought that this was just my complaining and it was just one person. I sort of showed a map last time of where people I knew that could actually hear the noise. Again, down as far south on 22 as the Metcalfs, up into the hamlet here, and beyond that. So I actually invited some people I knew who could hear it to actually come and talk to you. But it has not been as frequent this summer as it has been previously, but it hasn't gone away. And I think in light of the number of people that it inconveniences, the guy who is shooting is not a resident. He just bought that land to shoot on. He's from Bedford, where they have very strict noise controls. I just looked at them again today. And I just think that I understand that it's sort of a difficult thing to fix. It's difficult to kind of get it right and be fair about it. But in Bedford, they distinguish between noises that can be made during the day and noises that can be made in the evenings or on the weekends. That seemed like one possibility. And anyway, I just hope that there's a resolution, and a resolution that the zoning enforcement officer can actually enforce, because the biggest problem here seems to be that he doesn't feel able to do that with what we have written
Yeah,
down.
Leo, we went out of our way to make it very clear to the gentleman you're referencing that we were not drafting a law specifically to address him or that only particular concern. There were numerous other noise complaints between neighbors that have come up over the years. We referenced some of those. So I think hopefully we put him at ease, and I agree we should have something enforceable.
Okay, and we haven't even started on the illegal helicopter landings at Silo Ridge, so because those have been pretty noisy lately too. So anyway, good luck with the discussion.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, Andy.
Good evening. Won't keep you long, but just to somewhat reinforce what Leo has said.
Could you state your name?
What's that?
Could you state your name?
Oh, sorry. Andy Durbridge, Mosaic. I was sort of alerted to the fact that this was on the agenda again tonight, and somewhat surprised that it's taken so long to turn its wheels, because I can remember listening to comments and following the early drafting of the noise ordinance a year and more ago. So I played catch up over the last couple of weeks and just sort of brought myself up to speed. And I was sort of concerned, I think, partly that I wouldn't want this to fall through the cracks. I think it's an important, as much as anything else, a quality of life issue. The level of intrusion by some of the noises has reached a level that has become more than unreasonable. And I think in terms of using the word unreasonable, I would draw attention to the fact that when drafting all of these laws, one of the overriding concerns, I think, is to have laws that are reasonable. The governance of reasonableness in these laws is paramount. And having read your laws, the draft law, and given that, one of the person with a deal of concerns on the other side of the issue has been the gentleman from Bedford, I also took the trouble to look quite deeply into the laws in Bedford. And I think even though yours are completely sound, as far as I can see, and if he thinks he's being singled out, there's not one mention in this of firearms or words like that. So I think it's a catch-all type of common sense ordinance, which I think stands up pretty well. But if you wanted an alternative, if you take a look at the Town of Bedford ordinance, and they've just updated some of theirs, I mean, they call theirs a noise control law, the latest version that they've implemented. But again, it's very reasonable. And I think if the gentleman had concerns, if you said that you would match this town's law with the one where he comes from in Bedford, that's very reasonable. I think there's a whole deal of reasonableness, and their law starts off with a preamble, which I think is very good. And it talks about the fact that drafting the law for the residents is really, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, is really in the hope that neighbors don't disturb neighbors, and everybody gets along, and it's a good sense of community, and you sort of don't, go beyond the sort of level of reasonableness. And the law is only there when people do so. And the Town of Bedford's law was very good in its wording, I thought, which said, if anybody, wants to be unreasonable, this is what the code and the ordinance is there for. So I think, there are good models out there. I think if the gentleman from Bedford was reasonable, to keep using the word, I'm sorry, but he would have a reasonable understanding of what people might be concerned about with the level of these percussive noises. Now, I know the law covers a lot more than this, but I'm harking back to that because I think, what I've heard goes far and beyond any level of reasonableness. So I think just bearing those things in mind, and the fact that there are standards out there to follow already, I don't think it should be, a really difficult thing to have common sense ordinances that just protect the residents and stop unreasonableness.
Andy, I just want to address the sort of timeline here. We were working on that draft of that noise law with our former council, who we switched council unexpectedly at the end of last year, and then we kind of opened 2019 with a full docket for poor Ian here. So it was not that it fell off our radar from a priority standpoint. We just had a new council, and
it's just procedural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that we talked about during our conversations with that gentleman and during the noise law was drafting some legislation to address the use of tannerite in target shooting perspective. Other municipalities have done so. Neighboring municipalities have done so, and so I think that one may have fallen off the cart. We may want to bring that one back up, but thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that it does occur to me that the gentleman's property that is being, where this noise is coming from, is in the same sort of topography and gorge arrangement. And just a mile north of there is a perfectly good and legal shooting range at the Amenia Fish and Game Club, which was upgraded at great expense, and with the help of Silo Ridge. Again, partly because of quality of life issues. So it's not that these things don't exist and that the facilities are there. And I think it would be an absolute mockery of what they went through to upgrade their situation at the Fish and Game Club and the shooting range and everything there, if this gentleman, is essentially allowed to get away with an illegal shooting range, which is what it is. So I think I thank you for your comments, and I'm sure that the law will get good attention.
Well, I believe, what I think we're looking at doing is, instead of the overall change of the whole noise law, is to look at the noise law we have and draft an amendment to it. And with one of the things we all feel strongly about is banning the tannerite and, making that part of the law. So that's kind of where we're leaning right now. But, we're looking at what we can actually, how we can actually administer the law, and, with unreasonable noise, and, quantifying that better. So we're going to be looking at what we have, at all the information we had for the other, and see what we can do to strengthen what we already have.
Great.
By an amendment.
Great.
Okay?
Thanks. Thanks so much.
But we will be, making some changes, absolutely.
Thanks
Hi, my name's Charlie Miller. I live on Bog Hollow Road, and so I'm here also about the noise. I think people should be able to shoot. They should be able to do whatever they want to within a noise limit. So it's kind of crazy that I hear this exploding noise all the way there. I'm almost at Kent, truthfully. And I read through the draft. I'm glad to see we have new counsel of the revised noise ordinance, or the new noise ordinance, or whatever it was for the town. I looked at the Millbrook town ordinance, noise ordinance, which is a page long. It's very simple. And there's a way in which actually to measure it. To me, that was something that was kind of missing from our language, was there's this whole reasonable, not reasonable.
Right, the decibels.
Yes, exactly. Because if you can't quantify something, there's no way that a code enforcement officer can actually go test, say that it either is below the standard or it's above the standard. So I was a little confused by that. There's also an enormous amount of carve-outs, which may be a way to address people's fears that they're not going to be able to use their tractor, or they're not going to be able to target shoot, or whatever else. Millbrook doesn't have those kind of carve-outs. It's very simple. You can't have this decimal of a noise measured from your property line between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., and you can't have, and I think they go up 10 decibels between 8 p.m. and then 7 a.m. the next morning. It just seems like it became really complicated, and I don't know necessarily how a code enforcement officer can even go to somebody's property and be able to measure, if this noise is too loud. And now you're saying the Telluride, which I guess that's an exploding piece of something, which is what people use today maybe. I don't know if that's what they're going to use in another year. So it seems like we would outlaw something that may be replaced by something else.
Well, it would
shortly.
be in that,
Exploding ordinance,
exploding
I think is what
ordinance,
it's called.
yeah.
So we don't want anything that is causes it to explode, like a shot and then an explosion afterwards.
But it seems to me, again, it's about a noise level. It's about a decimal level. I also don't think that my neighbors should be able to, and I don't think I should be able to put my radio at my property line and blast it like, I'm at a U2 concert. And so my neighbors should be able to report me, and somebody should come out and be able to measure the noise that's emitting from my property and, tell me to stop, and then maybe fine me. I don't think it's just, and this gentleman, I don't know who he is, I don't know where he lives, if that's where that noise is coming from, okay. But I think it's about noise. It's not about a gunshot, it's about overall kinds of noise. That's my feeling. And I get why maybe he felt like he was being, singled out. But I'm sure there's other noise complaints that have happened over time. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Charlie, thank you. As a complete aside, Charlie, we've never actually met, but my former colleague was also a Charlie Miller, and one day he got an email with the tracking information for a house in Wassaic, and he's like, can you tell your constituent that somebody's got my email address? I'll refer him.
Forward it to me.
I hope you got that
It was an
package.
Amazon delivery, I never got.
Hi, I'm Ken Montero. I live in Wassaic, and I'm also here because of the noise. It's been very disruptive to live with these exploding targets, the shooting constantly. My dogs go crazy when they hear it, and it makes being out in my yard very unpleasant. And so I hope that we can pass something and enforce it so that people can live peacefully in their homes here in Amenia. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Dee Dee, would you like to come up after this lady?
Hi, I'm Nancy McKenzie, and I live here in Amenia. I do know about the noise ordinance controversy, and I just wanted to add that agree with you that it's about the noise. And the reason that I'm here is because of the motorcycle noise on Sheffield. There's repeated motorcycles on Sunday afternoon going up and down, and they're very loud. And until I heard about the issue of the noise ordinance, I didn't have an alternative, but this would come under that. So I'm in support of the ordinance, and the sooner the better.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? And I see we have our assembly person, Dee Dee Barrett, here. Dee Dee, would you like to say a few words? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett, and I very proudly represent the 106th Assembly District, of which Amenia is a very beautiful part. As its name, I had never seen that before, that Amenia comes from the Latin meaning pleasant to the eye, which I think that's perfect. Damien requested that I come and talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing at the state level, particularly around climate issues, but I also wanted to just share with you in the end a little bit of other things that, I think are particularly timely and, just want you to have on your radar screen that my office and I are working on. So we passed this year in the state legislature, and the governor signed it, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is to address the impact and the growing impact of climate changes on our communities and the ways that we are looking at addressing it at all the different levels. And we are seeing obviously here in Dutchess and Columbia counties in my district evidence of extreme weather events, deadly heat waves, droughts, that excessive rain that's flooding, that's made it very difficult for farmers this year, businesses in down the road a bit in Pleasant Valley, the town hall is basically flooded so regularly that they have to move that. The lines of the flooding lines in other parts of along the river are at risk, and many of our communities are looking at that as well. And this Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which we passed this year, set a number of goals to begin putting New York in a leadership position around that. And key to that was to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 85% by the year 2050, and to have net zero emissions throughout all sectors of the economy by 2050. And that includes requiring 100% of the state's electricity to be produced without emissions by 2040, which, as you know, is just 21 years from now. These are obviously ambitious goals, and they'll require a significant change in the way we think and act towards energy and climate policy. And a key piece of this is to depend more on renewable energy, including solar energy. And the requirement for the state is to produce 6 gigawatts of solar energy by 2025, which will take about 19 million solar panels, which should be enough to energy to power about 4 million homes. And that's, that is obviously, this is projection. Part of the this legislation is to now really break down how we make this all happen. In addition, the legislation establishes the New York State Climate Action Council, which will consist of 22 environmental experts who will keep our state on track with these goals. And The Department of Environmental Conservation is now tasked with establishing and implementing statewide greenhouse gas emission limits as we make other recommendations to help achieve this goal. So they have 4 years to complete the parameters of these particular limits. The law also helps preserve our natural resources by investing in accessible green energy projects like solar arrays, heat pumps, and wind turbines. This legislation will provide a framework and guidelines for a comprehensive review of New York's renewable energy program, including evaluating the process of meeting these annual targets, and it will establish reporting on energy savings and clean energy market penetration, particularly in disadvantaged low and moderate income communities. So the state is currently working on developing a roadmap. This was just passed this year. The governor signed it, and we will have more information on it as we continue with this process. The second piece of legislation I want to share with you is a bill that I've been working on for a number of years, and which we now have a pilot project in the work, and that is the Carbon Farming Act. For those of you who don't know, carbon farming basically is the process of taking carbon and out of the atmosphere where it's doing bad things. You know, we all know about carbon taxes and carbon fees and carbon penalties, and putting it into the soil where it actually does really good things. It enhances resiliency in soil, and it increases productivity. And it's really a time-honored practice. Many farmers over the years have, over the centuries, have engaged in these kinds of carbon farming practices, which include planting trees in pasture land and using cover crops and doing no-till, the kinds of things that allow carbon through roots to get very established and continue to take the carbon out of the atmosphere and put it in the soil. So our legislation created a pilot that we're about to embark on right now. The Soil and Water District in Dutchess County is the lead agency, and my colleague across the river in the Senate, Jen Metzger, was so interested in what we've been doing, working on this in Dutchess and Columbia County, which are my 2 counties, that she got money put into the budget to join me. And so we now will do this in 5 Hudson Valley counties and work with a number of different farms, ideally farms that are already kind of familiar with this process, so we can jumpstart it. And the goal here, as I said earlier, historically we've seen penalties, fees, all these sort of punitive approaches to carbon use. And this is, as I like to say, being a mother, I understand you, the carrot rather than stick approach. This is a incentive, and this is basically incentivizing farmers to do these climate smart practices and rewarding them for getting carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil, where in the end it's helping them as well. So this is a very exciting project, and it's very exciting to be doing this in our region. And if you know of any farmers, any of you who think they would like to be interested in being involved with this, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We're just in the beginning stages of this now and starting to collect names of farms that have expressed interest. And the goal is to work with fruit farmers and livestock farmers and dairy farmers and vegetable farmers and the other counties on the other side of the river, the onion and potato farmers in the Black Dirt region, so that we really understand the impact of this in a range of different farms in New York State, and certainly initially in the Hudson Valley. So then let me just follow up by saying, as Vicki said earlier, this is, you're obviously looking for grants. And as a climate smart community, you have the opportunity to get grants through DEC and the consolidated funding application. And we continue to be happy to support you in any way that you can. Some of this funding can be used for electric vehicle charging stations, recycling, planning and feasibility studies. And as there also are other DEC grants for various climate issues, including clean water, getting rid of invasive species, adaptation, resiliency, and more. Several years ago, Amenia was part of legislation to create inland waterways, which has made some of that money available to the town as well. And again, my team is very happy to work with you in any way that we can. We are certainly happy to support the letters, support you with letters of support in
Thank you very much for that.
the CFA process for the hamlet, and hopefully you will find in December that there's some money for you there. The other 2 points that I just want to raise, and I'm sure these are on your radar screen, but if not, 2020 is the census. This region of Dutchess County and in my particular district has historically been undercounted. And I think there's an opportunity here to both be part of complete count committees, but also create your own here locally to make sure that everybody is included. The federal government has actually given much less money than they have in the past. In the past, 10 years ago, every congressional district had funding for a census office. That's not anywhere near the level that we're seeing now. It's much less than that. And last cycle, 10 years ago, only about 77% of the households in my assembly district, what would have been my assembly district, mailed back their questionnaires. And this year, most of it is being done digitally, so we're hoping to have a lot of engagement with our libraries, because in general, those are places of trust in our communities, and have working broadband, and really encourage you to continue to look at ways that you can do this, because basically, it's estimated that every person not counted costs the state over $3,100 in federal aid this year, and then that's $3,100 per person less that you will have available, that we will have available as a state to fund the kinds of projects that you're doing.
We actually have someone coming to our next meeting from Complete Count.
Great.
And doing a presentation.
That's wonderful. We have a brochure here that Matt has. We brought a couple of them, just if, this is something our office has been working on. We'll, leave you a couple copies if you need more. We're happy to get that, but I'm glad to hear you're doing that, because it's particularly impacting immigrant communities and rural communities. Children under 5 are historically undercounted or not counted. People forget that their kids are people. I don't know how that happens exactly, but that is certainly what's been going on. And to facilitate that, we're also engaged in another aspect of this to support making sure that everybody comes out to the census, and that's a campaign that we're calling Know Your Rights. And it's basically about ensuring that everybody understands what is legal and what is not. There's been a lot of, obviously, raids from ICE. There's been a lot of rumors. There's been, the census question at one point had a citizenship question. That's been taken out. Everyone needs to be counted, whether they're documented or not, whether they're under 5 or not. And so we have some information, too, to make sure that people understand what's legal and what's not legal, and that they can help encourage the communities, particularly immigrant communities, to be counted, because in a town like this, I think that will be, a significant number in terms of getting the resources that you need to continue to address social services and roads and everything else that you do here. So Matt will leave you the brochures that we have, and I don't know if you have any questions, but I'm always happy to help. My office stands ready to, we have, as you know, in Hudson and in the town of Poughkeepsie, we have district offices as well as in Albany, and we're always happy to work with you on any number of things. So thank you.
We appreciate your support. I mean, for any grant application we've had, we've always been able to count on your office giving us a letter of support, and we really appreciate it.
Well, happy to do that, and happy to brainstorm with you on any other resources and other information that we might have at the state level that can be helpful. And was there anything else that, Damien, that you wanted?
No, I was just going to say we had some outreach from your staff about the Metro North parking situation.
Right.
We did have a discussion about that as a board a couple of meetings ago.
Is there anything you want to share with me?
I think the only thing is that there was no, I don't remember any objections for anyone here on the board to, if they were going to increase that or expand
So
the...
let me tell you where the background to that was, obviously you probably have followed, the MTA wanted more state funding, and, we wanted to make it clear that if we in upstate New York were going to support them, we needed to make sure that our constituents were getting something out of this as well. And I having 2 stations, pretty much this in my district and the city of Poughkeepsie just outside my district, but we did get, the word, get an assurance from Pat Foy that they would do a study that would look at parking needs, access needs, all of that, because if, in combination with the funding for the MTA is this congestion pricing in New York City, where the goal is to reduce the number of cars coming into New York City. So we have to have a place for those cars to go if they're taking the train in, and obviously parking here in Amenia and, and in Poughkeepsie, and making it accessible for people to get to the parking lots here is really important. It's a key piece of that. So that's kind of where that came from. We really wanted to understand where the town was in expanding parking. Is it something you really were against, really were for, hadn't really kind of
Well, we're really
strong
for
feelings?
it. There's, a problem, in at the Wassaic station. And I think there's limited parking at 10 Mile too. But in the Wassaic station, I would say 1/3 of the cars are Massachusetts and Connecticut. So we want to make sure everybody who wants to use the train, that there's a place for them to park so that they can.
Right, right. And have you had any conversations with anybody about having a structure there, about is MTA land adequate, or is there some town land that you would need to?
Yeah, so the original plans for Wassaic Station actually included a parking expansion. It wasn't built, but it was thought about.
Was it part of the plans? I
designed.
didn't realize that.
And they have plenty of land there. The other thing, as far as additional structures that's come up in the past on this board was, that's an interesting parking lot at Wassaic because it's a commuter lot. It's a weekenders lot, like people long-term park there during the week, but then on the weekends it's also where people go to get on the rail trail and start. And so expanding that, but also thinking about if they were interested in putting bathroom facilities there. I know we've had our own conversations with them about that. That would be extremely useful, especially to trail riders on the weekend.
That's actually a great idea. We should talk about that because I know that once the Empire Trail was kind of laid out and left our Harlem Valley Rail Trail out of it, I kind of pushed back and I said, this is one of the most beautiful rail trails anywhere. How could you not include it? And they said, well, we really want to support it. We want to be helpful. So it's possible that we can, look at getting some money from parks or something like that for that as well. So we can talk about that.
Well, one of the problems there, from what I understand, is there needs to be more long-term parking.
Yes, that's definitely a desire. I think, again, if people are going into the city to work and they want to leave their car here, they may want to leave it for an extended period of time. So yes, I think that is definitely the idea of having a structure where it's covered and where people can leave a car for a longer period of time.
Yeah, because we want to, encourage people to move here and live here, and we want to make sure that, they're able to work from here also.
Exactly. Well, that's the broadband issue. Part of that. Are you all okay on that? Have you had adequate broadband throughout the town?
Okay with what?
Okay.
Have you all?
With broadband?
Yeah.
My recollection the last time we did the Altice franchise is that there were really only a handful of houses that were not able to be connected. That's my
Deep Hollow still doesn't have connection. The part closest to Amenia, the upper part. I don't know that for sure, but for a long time they did not have it.
You have broadband at your house?
Yeah, you have it. Yeah.
You're talking between Millbrook and 22 on
It's
Deep Hollow?
Deep Hollow. If you go opposite Furnace Bank Road, directly across the street is Deep Hollow.
Right.
And if you go at least as far as at least a mile or mile and a half in, I don't believe they have any service. And we had talked about getting service to them, but the reality is there are not enough houses per mile.
Right,
in
it's that last
stretch.
mile stuff.
It's very
Yeah.
inaccessible, very difficult, so there's not going to be ever a ton of houses on that stretch. It's not worth their effort to put broadband in that section. At least that was the case.
Well, we
least
can
3 years,
bring up
4
the
years ago.
conversation again because we're currently in negotiations for
It's worth asking.
renegotiating our
Yeah, no,
renewal of our
They should be able to
Altice
do something.
franchise
I mean,
agreement.
And they should be, that's the perfect time to do it. I mean, if you're talking about asking people to be spending $10,000 just to be able to function in the 21st century in your town, there's got to be a meeting of the minds from the supplier there to help make it happen. So again, please be in touch if there's anything we can work on, and thank you for the opportunity to come here.
Dee Dee, can you just say one, back to the carbon, it was incentives that you were offering, that would be for private farmers who
Yes,
would comply with the Carbon Farming Act?
Well, with basically employing practices that are carbon smart practices.
So they
And
would
that's
get
partly what
rewarded.
this study, this pilot is going to do, is really figure out how do we measure, how are we going to, compensate people. Initially for the study, the money will go towards seed and, and some of these other, other product that they need to, to move forward with it. But in the end, the goal is to figure out a way, in my mind, statewide, that we can do this, but certainly in the short term for this region, for farmers to be compensated for doing that.
So do you have a summary of that or information about that you could send us?
On
that
the
we could
Carbon
share with
Farming Act?
farmers?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we definitely do. And I mean, it's going to be, it's a work in progress now because we got funding for the pilot, and the pilot is being developed right now. So maybe we'll wait but if you know of farmers who are interested in the concept, just have them be in touch with.
Well, we'd be
with
happy to, to give them the information. It's,
Yeah, we only need about 8 or 10, so I'm going to trust that if there's somebody that bubbles up, you'll let us know, and that's for 5 counties. But we will certainly, once we have something formal, share with you about that.
Okay,
Sweet.
okay.
super.
Okay?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much.
Is there any other public comment? Supervisor's report. Wassaic Trail to the Train update. The DOT permit group will not renew the highway permit for the Trail to the Train until they receive CTE authorization for a signal adjustment. Insurances for the contractor have not been approved by MNR. Noise law update is on the August 15th, 2019 agenda for town board meeting. Regional ambulance grant. NDP, Northern Dutchess Paramedics, sent a new contract proposal with negotiated annual prices from the towns of Northeast, Dover, and Amenia, which is being reviewed by the town attorneys. Grant update. We received $50,000 SAM grant reimbursement from the Dormitory Authority for Amenia Town Hall, energy-efficient window replacement in town clerk, court chambers, courtroom, town board meeting room, assessor, building department officers, in addition to the windows in the downstairs bathroom. Solar law updating draft with the most current comments so that a final law can be proposed and another public hearing date set. Town clerk report.
Good evening. At the latter part of the afternoon, I circulated the minutes of the July 18th and August 1st meetings. I'm not sure if the board's had the opportunity to see that email. If you want me to present them again at the next meeting, I can do so, unless you guys have had the opportunity to review.
I have a few.
So then we'll present them at the next one if you want to email me
Some
yours.
changes. Okay.
Yeah, because
Proposed
that was
changes?
the worst conversation ever trying, because it
Yeah.
wasn't a real motion, it was just that you were trying to present a motion. I see what you were writing. So I'd ask that you just rewatch that part of the, before you make your suggestions. How about that?
Sure, but I think the reality is it's
Because
going to
it
have to
never
make
happens.
sense.
Yeah.
It's going to have to make sense.
So then that way the board members know that when we're transcribing, we have to speak and make sense. So I want you to
So I
watch that
apologize,
again.
that was convoluted.
Because
Absolutely
you guys were
was.
listing items to which you wanted
Yeah.
to create into a motion to which you never was seconded.
Right.
So, but you were just listing them, so when you just, so we'll bring that to the next
So
meeting.
you want to table it to the next
Or
meeting?
just let both of them wait
What
to
are
the
we
next
talking
meeting.
about?
The minutes.
No, but which item?
So there was on
On page 2.
four.
Or 4, on
of the July 18th, if you flip over to
Doyle
page
presents a
4.
motion to obtain a quote from the planner to look at the acceptable use, business in the RA districts, and soil and solid waste. The motion was it was not seconded, and it was agreed upon to wait for the contract to be signed before you move forward with this motion.
Which date?
July
18th.
18th.
All right, sorry.
So as you're rambling, I'm transcribing. So,
Right.
and that's why when I looked up, the statement I said to the board is that wasn't a motion. And then that's when Ian piped up and he stated, we should wait until the contract. And that's why nobody, I'm assuming that is why no one seconded your start of the motion. And we also took out, you had asked for the escrow law to also be added, and then it was corrected that Ian would be looking at the escrow law, not our planner. So that's.
I don't have any
that
trouble with
whole-
that.
Yeah, that
So
whole area.
I think it's
was
just
needed.
that one sentence, it's not a
Do
big
you
one.
want to change it or present to them?
I'm happy to rewrite it and then send it through everybody and see if they also agree.
Yeah, that's.
Is that all right?
Oh, we watched it twice.
Okay, but it just needs to make sense. I mean,
So, yeah, and it would be really helpful is when we know we're moving forward with items, and one of the items I brought up with attorneys in the past is if you know you're going to present something, to go ahead and move that as a motion and present those, so we're all on the same page, because when you try to move motions and conversations, it's very difficult to put what your motion is. And I look at him quite often to say, what part is the motion?
Okay, so we'll table these.
We'll
to
table
the-
them both until you can review it and then submit your written comments, which would be great. The other item that I'm just wanted to touch base with the board tonight is I'm going to request that you guys look at the implementation of the rec program that was discussed earlier last year. One of the things that I did work with in response to the audit that was done from last year regarding summer camp, you'll see what I've done is I worked with the summer camp director and assistant director. I've obtained copies of each one of the students that participated in the program and maintain receipts, not only giving to the parent, also maintaining here within this book, so that way when I get a financial audit on me, you can see why I took what money and the justifications of that. The amount of time that it took to key these in and work through the program was a lot of time. And the hours that go in, because you're handwriting out the receipts, giving them out, going back and keying, keeping track of the students when they're coming and going. It really falls outside of the town clerk's job responsibility, but in efforts to make our auditor happy, I maintain these records, and this is really would be the job of a rec director or
Piece of software. I mean,
Yeah.
so I'll take the blame on that one. Part of the rec software that we vetted, I think we actually sent around and got feedback from the commission. Everybody seemed on board with it, and then it sort of got lumped into the website redoing, which we're pushing off until next year. But there is no reason for it to be tied up with that. It can be its own standalone portal. And so I think that should, if all the payments are made through that portal and that should take a lot of the burden
Yeah, we should have
off.
that.
That'd be great.
We'll have that set up probably by the spring.
I'm already talking with Kelly for baseball, and, as, believe it or not, school's right around the corner. That means
Yeah.
our next seasons are right around the corner. So I bring it to you this early on, so that way we can be in place and be ready for the new year, and I would beg of that of the board. So if Damien, you're taking it on, I'm gonna hold you to it.
Well, that's fine. With that, the cost of that software, which was not very much, if I recall correctly, was that going to come out of Rec's budget or
Yes.
the town budget? All right, so they need to approve, or they need to tell us to
No, we've
move to
already,
spring?
we've already approved it. We just need to
Do it.
implement,
Oh.
put everything together.
Okay, well
It's all
then,
been done, yeah, we're just,
But it's, yes, because the cost of it'll be, it's a percentage of the revenue.
right. So now that the email thing is done, I will happily take on
Okay, thank
that
you.
as my next
thank you.
Yay.
IT project.
One of the projects, now that summer camp's over, I'm working with the dog officer. Mia's been great. She has asked a lot of questions, wanted to find about dog licensing, reviewed the dog law. So one of the items that is happening is a dog enumeration and census notice will be sent out on or about September 3rd. It's going to go to every property owner in the town of Amenia. We've worked with Dutchess County Real Property to ensure that we have all of the addresses for all residents and all property owners in the town of Amenia. A notice along with a copy of a dog license application will be sent. And it is going to be returnable to the town clerk's office on or before October 30th of this year. After this date, if you have not returned your form or contacted the town clerk and are found to be harboring an unlicensed dog, you will be subject to a ticket and possibly court fines for each dog, along with a one-time enumeration fee of $15 per dog will be added to the dog license base fee. So anyone who has not licensed their dog is a resident in the town of Amenia. Your dog is over the age of 4 months old. Please feel free to stop by the office. Either myself or Erica will help you register your dog. When you come in, you'll need to bring proof of your rabies vaccination, and the current fees for a dog that has been spayed or neutered is $12.50. If your dog has not been spayed or neutered, the cost is $20.50. So that is a new ongoing project, and I really believe Mia is going to work very well with the office, ensuring that we move forward. So I look forward.
Every year, they need to...
Every year, your dog has to be licensed. If you come in with a rabies certificate, that is good for 3 years, because when your puppy is under 1 year of age, you can only get the 1 year. Thereafter, you get a 3 year. You can prepay for the 3 years. However, if the dog moves out for whichever reason, up or down, those fees are not returnable. So that was some of the problems I was having my first year when individuals were asking me, is my dog, is the fees returnable? So I encouraged them 1 year just because I was having those issues, but I most certainly can, the system will allow me to do up to 3 years. But thank you for talking about that. And Mia is looking for rabies clinics here in the community, so if you are looking for information, please feel free to contact our new dog officer. She is wonderful and full of a lot of good information. I present this evening the certification of the vouchers on the abstract that was circulated, dated August 12th, consisting of 7 pages, and I'm presenting this evening the total amounts of General Fund A, $68,640.96. Highway Fund in the amount of $22,286.95. Amenia Lighting, $1,361.96. Wasake Lighting, $495.78. Amenia Water, $12,156.57, for a total of the monthly bills, $104,942.22. Somebody move to authorize the super to make those payments?
Could we just talk about the water real fast? I'm assuming, does that have to do with the leak? Or why is it so high this month?
Water hydrants, part of this.
No, it looks like a
There was a
hydrant.
hydrant replacement on Railroad Avenue this past month. It was destroyed back on February 15th of this year. And we finally,
And I
That's the one.
signed paperwork today for us to get reimbursed $10,000 for
Okay.
that from the insurance company. Is there a second?
I don't think we need a motion. I'll make that motion.
I think
Damien.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Michelle? Councilwoman Samoji?
Yes.
Councilman Morris?
Yes.
Councilman Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilwoman Doyle?
Yes.
Supervisor Purdy?
Yes.
And one last announcement, the office will be closed on Monday, August 26th, from 9 till about 1, as Erica and I will be attending a tax collector class in LaGrange. And that'll conclude my report for this meeting.
Sorry, what date was that, Dawn?
Monday, August 26th.
Highway report? Megan?
Last week, we worked with Lee's Tree Service. We took some trees down on Clark Hill. We replaced a 36-inch pipe on Benton Hill, and we also added some drainage pipe on Sharon Station Road to help with a spring in the road. Likes to pop up in the middle of the winter, and then we got ice buildup. It likes to run down to the rail trail. We've also been started hauling in some sand for winter. And today we started sealing roads with Peckhams. Today we sealed separate Flanagan and Flint Hill, and tomorrow we will finish up with Sharon Station and Benton Road, or Benson Road. And that's all I have. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recreation? Do you have anything?
I don't have it. I didn't go to the recreation meeting, so I don't know what they're doing. The only thing I have is the senior trip is next Wednesday, August 21st. The trip for Lake George will leave Tally Ho at 8 a.m. and it will leave the Amenia Town Hall at 8:30. Okay, that's the Lake George trip, next Wednesday, the 21st. That's pretty much it. I am looking into some really good trips for next year, but when I get more details, I'll let you know about that.
Are there any other,
The only thing I wanted to ask you, Victoria, is if you could call the people that park in the lot down there, if they will leave a space for us to have the cars come in on Wednesday morning.
Okay,
'Cause they'll be-
we can do that.
Is there any plan to, did you get any applications for an instructor for our performing arts program?
No, I'm going to advertise that out.
Because right about now, I would be putting together a press release and getting the applications ready.
I
for
thought we
this.
advertised.
Yeah, I don't know that went in. Let me follow up on that one.
Okay.
I know I was authorized.
Okay. CAC is meeting next Wednesday, the 21st at 7 p.m. here in this room. Welcome anybody who wants to attend.
Are there any other committee reports? No? Okay, solar law discussion?
I guess I can summarize the activities for the last 2 weeks. Would that be appropriate? Victoria, Ian, and I think it was Monday of last week, spent about 2.5 hours on the phone going through the draft at the time. And we discussed the process to get this finally tied up and presented to the board. We agreed that we would make certain changes and then flag those for discussion here as a group, with the board. So that went on, and then we also, I believe on Wednesday of that same week, Nina, Leo, Ian, and I spent another hour and a half on the phone going through some of the changes that we had discussed with Victoria and just getting their feedback on those items. So I think at this point really is for us as a board to go through and talk about the changes. Is there a hard copy of the full marked up draft?
You should have had one circulated.
Huh? I know it came around by email, but I don't think we have it in our packet. Granted, you circulated a draft on Monday of this week. I provided comments I think on Tuesday or Wednesday.
There was one draft emailed to all board members that had all the comments merged.
Right. But we just don't have it in our packet.
That's
at the moment. So we should talk about that as a group. I think that's the next item, is for us to go through those markups and discuss them and weigh in yay or nay here. But it would be more helpful if we had, thank you so much, be helpful if we had the document in front of us. I'm not sure how you want to do that.
Well, I can go get it. Do you want to?
I have one copy that could be copied.
Well, if you guys are, did everyone have a chance to take a look at it in the email? No?
Don, can you make copies? Don will make copies.
Okay, so why don't we table that until we have, and then
Well,
I
we
can
we can just come back to it. We have some other matters we need to take care of.
we can do that.
What's the next resolution number, Don?
It's going to be 64. I'm just going to get this ready for her. And at the top, this, if you can make 5 copies for them.
Is your copier working or not?
Yes,
Okay.
Frank assisted me.
Is this the private road naming?
Yeah. Authorizing naming of private road for E911 Sparrow View. Whereas Dutchess County E911 requires the naming of private roads with 3 or more residential structures, as well as newly created town roads. And whereas the Town of Amenia Planning Board has approved a mixed-use resort community on 670 plus or minus acres known as Silo Ridge Field Club, whereas the state lots 49, 50, and 51 share a common driveway and therefore require a name for the private driveway. Whereas the Town of Amenia Planning Board has approved and authorized the name of Sparrow View. Whereas Dutchess County E911 has approved the name of the new road subject to confirmation by the Town Board. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board hereby confirms and ratifies the determination of the Town of Amenia Planning Board and E911 with respect to the following roads, Sparrow View. I make that motion?
Second. Supervisor Perotti?
Yes.
Councilwoman Doyle?
Yes.
Councilman Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilman Morris?
Yes.
And Councilwoman Samardzija?
Yes. Resolution number 65, 2019, transfer of funds for August 2019. Whereas the Town Board has the authority to transfer funds when necessary or unanticipated to amend the budget. Whereas budget amendment in the general fund, increasing revenue line 3089.01, state aid other by $21,755.08, and increasing expense line 186,204.01.155, building CE window replacement by $21,755.08 for SAM grant reimbursement from the Dormitory Authority for 2019 expenses. Whereas budget amendment in the general fund, increasing revenue line 3089.01, state aid other by $48,370, increasing expense line 16204.01, 154, building CE maintenance CDBG by $26,015 for CDBG ADA grant reimbursement from Dutchess County for 2019 expenses. Whereas budget amendment in the general fund, increasing expense line 14201.01, attorney CE by $50,000, and decreasing the appropriated fund balance account 599 by $50,000 for legal expenses. Whereas budget amendment in the general fund, increasing expense line 16604.01.074, central storm CE by $972, and decreasing expense line 19004.01.080, special item CE, unallocated by $972 for additional supply expenses. Whereas budget amendment in the general fund, increasing expense line 80104.01.048, zoning CE conferences by $321.78 and decreasing 802.04.01.048 planning CE conferences by $321.78 for stenographer expense, whereas budget amendment in the general fund increasing expense line 16204.01.062 building CE maintenance by $8,000, decreasing expense line 19004.01.080 special items CE unallocated by $3,000 and decreasing line 16804.01 data processing CE by $5,000 for unanticipated expenses. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Amenia authorize the transfer of necessary budget lines to process the transactions. I make that motion.
Second.
Discussion.
The last one, the $8,000 increase of buildings maintenance was for?
The additional money for the electrical contractor for the generator.
Oh.
So we had to replenish that line.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Brody?
Yes.
Councilwoman Doyle?
Yes.
Councilman Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilman Morris?
Yes.
Councilwoman Smoji?
Yes. Okay, email.
Yeah, sure, let's do that. All right, so there's 3 quotes here that I've distributed to the rest of the board. The first one is it's a rough quote in an email from our current contractor, BAS. And we're talking right now about license pricing. BAS, we requested a separate quote from them to help us perform the migration.
Just so everybody understands, we're looking at upgrading our current email to bring it more into,
Well, we're running Microsoft Exchange 2007, and I believe
which is not good.
Some time past that. So we were looking at Office 365 licenses. The rough quote we got from BAS was about, and the difference here is that we're not buying a piece of software that we're installing. It's an annual fee now that the town will pay. So they had estimated it would be somewhere between $208 and $300 per user per year. We then spoke with the county, who keyed us into some state negotiated pricing, and so we went to that licensed reseller, got a quote, which came out to about $100 less per license type, 100 per year or 200 per year, depending on all the features. But what they neglected to do was extend the state's pricing to us. So when I asked them to do that, that resulted in the $106 license going down to $6.28 per year. And the full tier license, which it would include all the apps, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Skype, and all that for folks who work here in Town Hall, that's $17.31 per year. So I would highly recommend we move forward with this one as opposed to the other,
This one meaning
the cheap one, this
from,
from Dell.
Thank you. It's in black and white.
What we have to do before we move forward on this, it's the black and white one. Yeah. So this is $6.28 per user per year. That first user type is the type we discussed as only needing email access, right? So all of our committee members, our volunteers, folks who have a town email address but don't sit at a desk, don't have a workstation, don't need all the, office suite, we would pay $6.30 per year for each of those volunteers, so they could have town email address as well as file storage. And then the second license type, it's $17.31 per user per year. That's for like folks in Dawn's office or the CEO's department, anybody who works in town hall and needs access to all the apps. This also means that we're not paying to renew, like buy Microsoft Word for any of the workstations on any new workstation purchases. So when we buy a new computer, we don't have to also then pay for a license for Office and all that. It's included as part of 365. So I think this is a pretty great deal, and in the long run will save us a lot of money, and it's also more secure. So Microsoft hosts all of their government accounts on a private, separate cloud just for government user types. BAS had recommended another, I think it was $1,800 a year in backup expense. I think that's something we can discuss as a board. Microsoft claims it's not fully necessary. Basically, Microsoft would have to go out of business before the town lost its records, which could happen. But you know, if we didn't want to spend that extra $1,800 a month for a third-party backup system, we didn't have to, according to Microsoft. So what we need to figure out then is just what this quantity column needs to be. So who needs just email here in the town, and who needs the full app suite. And then we can place an order for these licenses, give the licenses to BAS. They can do the migration in a week or two, and they can do it remotely. And then
Now, how would the backup work again?
the backup would be something BAS would set up.
So we would have to pay them for the backup
So backup is already included in
in their price?
Microsoft. Like
Okay.
in their standard solution, they back everything up in a separate data center, and you know they're confident, I guess, in their approach that it's fine. It meets like federal government data retention policies.
Can I just ask one question,
Yeah.
Damien? In regards to the backup, I delete an email. Who's going to assist with getting that return? Because
BAS.
And the reason why I'm asking is because after speaking with a member of BAS who was out here doing an on-site work, we were talking about the different options. And the one thing that he did point out to me was the backup-ify service for all the mailboxes, and it was $150 a month. That was the quote. I don't know if it's changed since you had the initial conversation, because one of the things he said to me is that once you're on Microsoft, if you delete it, you've deleted it, and once it's been purged, it's purged, and Microsoft doesn't... it's not like they keep them where they can go back and then, retrieve them at a later date. So I don't know, then I guess I don't feel confident, because sometimes you hit that delete button and
Yeah.
you need it to come
Well-
back because it's in your trash and it holds there for a couple days and then
So we're not allowed to delete anything ever as government
Correct.
employees, right? So
you should take away the delete button.
with all due respect to our friends at BAS, and we have a wonderful working relation, they were not terribly familiar with the government version of.
So it's a separate, completely...
It's a separate program completely, and the license types are specific for government, and all of the data retention policies and all it'll be there forever. We also.
No, I just want to say, because I sent Vicki a strange email, and the reason was that I sent it is I couldn't get on the computer with my password. So I called up the BAS people, the BAS people, and he was on the phone with me and on the computer with me, and he helped me plug my computer in to make it work. And it worked, and my email came up for here, of the town. And then, I don't know, remember I shut it down or whatever it was and went back in again, and it said, don't turn your computer off, we're configuring stuff. Which I don't know what any of that means, but I let it do what it was going to do. So the reason I got the strange email that I sent Vicki, because when I went into my email to look at the town, hers was the first one I saw on the list. And I said, gee, what's Vicki asking me about
Is that the one about the show?
the show? Yes. I'm saying, why is she asking me about the show? And I looked at my email. Every single email that anybody has ever sent to me since I've been on the board, 2,000 of them, were there. So I spent 5 hours yesterday trying to get rid of about 700 of them, because I don't know how to do it otherwise without looking at what it is. I'm trying to figure out which email I'm looking for that I know someone is sending me. So my question, I don't know what I'm saying to you, but is that going to happen to me again?
Well,
No, because a lot of those should have been archived.
yes, so it's good to keep your email box tidy, but just because you hit delete, I think what we're talking about here is that you hit delete on those 700 emails yesterday.
Yes.
They don't actually get deleted because we're government employees and we.
So they went, did they go someplace else now?
They get archived currently by our vendor who's backing that. Our
Yeah, they're
email
just not in
server
your
up.
Inbox anymore, but they're
Well,
still
He
there.
put them all back in my inbox.
Yeah, because they never go away. Like
Yeah.
he probably
I'm the worst person to have a computer.
replicate. So the way this would be different is that instead of having a server in the closet here at Town Hall, it would just be, everything would reside in Microsoft's government cloud.
Okay, so my next question is, I'm sorry folks taking up your time, but maybe you're like me. Now that I've deleted so many of them down, are they going to come back?
No, they won't go back in your inbox.
Hopefully they don't
No.
come back.
No, they won't come down, okay.
Just look at the dates on, that's all.
They're under,
I know.
they're actually under deleted, so they won't be back in your
They all
inbox.
came, because when I saw the one from Vicki Doyle about the dance program, I said, oh, okay. And then the reason I sent you back, I said, all of a sudden I see there's like 7 from Vicki Doyle. And I said, this woman never emails me like 7 things in a day. And then I realized they put them by people's names, or they put them by whoever they were, like Damien. You go,
I send a lot of emails.
Yes. It was hard.
And what is the next step for this?
So we have to identify how many license types. So, and it doesn't have to be a perfect number. We can buy a little. Like buy a little bit more than we need, especially given that they're so inexpensive, but it is a recurring annual cost. So let's just be careful there. So how many folks just need email? Again, that's like committee members,
I think
rec.
out of fairness, it would be, I think it'd just be fair to get the entire list that they currently have of who's on email and then go through them.
We have that, but we needed, so I got it.
We purged it, and then then you'll get the new
Yeah,
one.
I didn't get the purged version, because the one I got had a bunch of folks that weren't like volunteers.
Yeah, some
anymore,
people
so-
had to be taken off.
So that's the
Okay,
next
so
step.
we need how many license types for each category?
Correct. Email only category and then the full user suite. And then we need to make a decision if we want the additional backup for, it's 150 a month, Dawn, is the
Yeah.
1,800 a year that they quoted me, it's the same.
Well, that's,
Okay, so Damien, you're going to answer the question for me. Do I just need the email, getting them in? And
No, you need the full.
you need everything.
You need the full
sent?
suite.
I
Yeah.
need everything, thank you.
Excel, PDF, Skype,
Yeah.
you guys can do Skype meetings.
Right.
Okay, all right. That's why I'm asking, because.
So this is all, so I need to get you the information for email only and full user suite.
Exactly. Then we'll buy these licenses. I don't, they'll adjust this quote with the quantities we want. I don't know how we did budget for this, so I
Yes.
guess you just pay it. They'll send us the licenses the same day. We get them to BAS, and BAS will do the conversion in a week or 2. And there's a fee for that as well. I think their fee for the conversion was $3,000. It's a one-time fee to migrate everybody's email boxes.
That's for the migration?
That's for the migration, and then
So we need to vote to approve doing this?
Yeah.
Do we need a resolution, or, since this is a contract,
Once we
right?
have everything all set, right? Do it in one shot?
Yeah, because we don't have a
Yeah.
line total for these yet.
Yeah, so I think once we have all the information, I'll get the information, then I'll do one review.
Okay, so next meeting,
Yeah.
we'll
I'll have
have
that all
everything.
ready to go.
Yeah, and I'll have all the
There's a lot of
information.
committees out there, so there's a lot of
Okay.
emails out there.
Officially the most boring agenda item ever. Sorry. but it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, this will be,
It's
it's gonna be
gonna
good.
be-
Educational for me, Davey, because
It's gonna be
No,
good.
no, I mean just
No, okay.
it's really bad. Like right now, like if there's a PDF attached, it opens in another window, and then it's
It's very
not good.
archaic.
Okay,
what I
solar
have to
law?
do.
All right, solar law. So let me just run through this quickly. I did send the board an email, kind of outlining the guiding principle behind a lot of these changes, and that was that I thought it would be most fair to think of in a residential application, residential situation, it'd be most fair to think of a solar array as, you know, a roof replacement project, and it would be only fair to treat a ground-mounted array the same way as any other accessory structure, which is already, you know, already has like guiding, our zoning code already addresses accessory structures. And that was really the base of it. There's no comments on, there were a couple of things. The very first modifications at the bottom of page 1, we decided to strike this sentence in there that never really made any sense to me. This comes from the NYSERDA model law. But you know, it just never made sense to me, and I don't want to just put stuff in here that, although it's in the model law, it doesn't really, I don't understand what we're doing, and so we just all agreed to strike that, and now.
And what we're striking is that increases the solar energy systems area by more than 5%
Of
of the original footprint.
Right.
So now it's basically any change.
Any change to any existing solar system, you need to go get a building permit, and that makes sense, and that's fine, and I think that looks good. The other thing, the sort of global change that we decided to address very explicitly is just to go out and just flat out say any solar anything needs a building permit, and that is addressed in, well, we'll just go through it item by item, but we moved that section up to the top after the definitions. Next change on page 2 is just a comment that I have. So building integrated photovoltaic products. I am, because I don't know exactly what all falls under this category. I know there's a definition there, but a lot of it is theoretical. Like there are not really products out on the market, not a lot of products out on the market that fall into this category. Tesla's solar shingles are an example of what would fall into this category. But given that this is such a new, quickly evolving, emerging technology, the concern that I have is that trying to address it wholesale in the law is difficult because we don't know what's going to come down the road eventually. So my recommendation for this type was that anyone who was considering something that fell into this type would have to go before the planning board for review. It was not just a straight building permit because our code enforcement officer is not going to be equipped to address all of these new different types of technologies that might come out. So that's just a concern that I have that I think the town should try to
So it can't be in
protect
the definitions?
It can. It should stay there. It's how it's treated in the use tables later, and we'll get to that in a bit. That's the concern that I have with that type.
So the definition stays?
Yeah, definition would stay. The next was on page 3. This is under roof-mounted system. We spent a lot of time going back and forth over, what the appropriate, whether it was appropriate to legislate the angle of installation or not, and I think we came to a good compromise on the call with Nina and Leo, which was we just regulate the solar panels to be a max 12 inches off of the surface of the roof. And, if it's angled at 5 degrees because that makes sense and the homeowner wants to increase that extra cost, it's fine. It's just 5 degrees and it's no higher than 12 inches off of the roof. So the reason I flagged this definition is that it includes the word flush mounted, and I just felt like we had come to agreement elsewhere in the law and agreed to get rid of the dictation of the angle of installation, but continue to have the restriction of height. And so I just am suggesting we remove flush mounted from that definition. That would be my recommendation.
Well, I totally agree about flush mounted because you're right, it's contradictory, it doesn't really make
Right.
sense. I still think it might be worth saying that our preference is for the panels to be parallel to the roof because that makes them least visible. But I think giving people the option of doing whatever they want within that 12 inches, I'm fine with.
So I'm glad you brought that up because the other thing that I spent a lot of time sort of diving into was this idea of including preferences in law. And I don't think it's appropriate because it just risks the potential for lack of clarity or abuse or something. So I understand what you're saying, but I would just not include squishy preferences that.
Well, then I'm happy just insisting that they be parallel. I mean, that's fine. If the squishiness bothers you, then
No,
we can keep the original rule, Damien.
No, we talked about that already, like that section. So let's go together.
If I could just make one comment on,
Go ahead.
on the definition itself. I'm not quite sure you should remove flush mounted. I think it might be better to state that roof-mounted systems are comprised of photovoltaic panels that are either fixed or flush-mounted to the roof or support rack systems. Because then it's inclusive, it doesn't exclude one either way, it just includes both types of mountings.
Oh, great.
Right?
Yeah, that's
I don't want to exclude.
There you go. Perfect. That makes total sense. Thank you. All right, my next comment is on item 6, which says, does the canopy definition here conflict with the definitions in section C1, which is the building integrated photovoltaic product category? Again, that one that frightens me a little bit because we do reference photovoltaic canopies and awnings in that section, and then we address it separately again in 6. So either we strike it from 1, meaning we strike just photovoltaic canopies and awnings from 1, but I think that probably introduces a lot of other complex changes later. I'm not sure what we do here.
I think that was introduced because of the woman who specifically asked about a solar parking covering. So we were trying to figure out a way to do that, and we figured that if that was regulated as a building integrated photovoltaic system, then we just sort of folded it in to something we already have. And it was really, recognizing that her suggestion of having a carport or even having a bigger system over a parking lot was something we probably wanted to encourage, and not wanting to sort of make that a whole separate category.
Okay. All right, that sounds good to me. I just didn't understand why it was basically defined twice, but that makes sense.
Yeah, just because the other definition is for anything that basically is on the exterior of a building, but that's built in. Like, that could be something on the surface of the glass that harvests energy. That could be siding, which they're starting to make now. So there are a variety of things, but I think the solar canopy seemed different because it was something that was kind of above. It was sort of like a solar panel, but it wasn't. It was different than either ground-mounted or a solar panel because it involved a specific use. So I think that was the idea.
Okay. So that takes us to page 4. We do reference the New York State Uniform Code. Leo's comment here is that we should explicitly reference the fire code. We didn't remove that from an earlier draft, but
I just think that, again, because it means that whoever wants to put in a solar panel has to go look that up. And all we're really saying is that they need to be aware that firemen need access to the roof. And it just seemed to me that if we say that in plain language, if there's a question about that, they know where to look.
Yeah, the only problem with trying to distill code and law into plain language is you run the risk of muddying it or oversimplifying and missing something. And so just to be clear, what we're saying here is that any solar installation in the town of Amenia has to comply with New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code, the New York State Energy Conservation Construction Code, and any solar installer would be familiar with those, right? That's
Well, yes, you're very trusting, but I mean, my concern again is just that if someone wants to install a system, they should just be aware that, because that's an issue for the local fire departments, that there be a way for the firemen to get onto the roof. So, I mean, I think that, I just think that that saying that you're looking at the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code doesn't explain why you're doing that.
So why don't we annex the code?
Why don't we annex the code?
Yeah.
Because no one's going to have time to read that. I mean, we could do a reference, but that means that just to inform people that they should think about how a fireman's going to get onto the roof if they have solar panels, they have to read like a 140-page document.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I think you should reference it, not annex it.
I mean, I don't think it's a problem to reference it.
They would
but
be the same, right? Referencing it in its entirety or annexing it. I just don't want to like pay Ian to go through it and distill it in a way that is. What is your recommendation here? Do you understand my concern?
Well, if it's just paying Ian, I mean,
Excuse
we've
me.
made a lot of changes here that required paying Ian. So.
Leo, come on, man. Like, first off, be respectful, all right?
Sure, Dean.
If I'm understanding Leo's comment, I think he's trying to put some context to the requirement. In stating that we're trying to address, among other things, fire access. Am I categorizing that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an architect, and I know that when specs are written, that it very often just says it should meet, ACME number, blah, blah, blah. But to think that a contractor, when he's going through the drawings, is going to actually go to each of those and read through the whole thing to understand what every little piece is, I mean, in an ideal world, that would be great. But I just think for a resident who's putting up solar panels, they just need to understand that what we're saying under safety requirements is that firemen need to be able to get on the roof.
I don't disagree with that at all. My concern is legal. So you're the lawyer here. We've got another lawyer. My concern is that we try to distill New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Building Code in a easy-to-read, not 140-page version, and then we miss something, and then somebody comes and said, I did it this way because that's what it says in your code, even though all we're doing is referencing the state fire code that we want them to comply with.
Ultimately, each system would have to be inspected at some point and approved for compliance to this section. So presumably, fire access would be addressed as just in compliance with the code and with the installation. I guess if you worded it, as I stated before, there's no harm in having it because it's, among other things, to address fire safety and fire access safety. In that sense, you're not limiting, but you are at least pointing out a concern, I think, that he has. I don't necessarily think it has to be in because I think the code addresses it.
My only concern, again, was legal liability, and if I have no problem providing some additional color to what we're trying to achieve there. So I don't object to Leo's comment at all, as long as it doesn't put us in a difficult place later.
You would have to have the language vague to so it doesn't limit. I understand your concern.
Okay. So the next section, E, is the one that I talked about in the beginning. We moved this section up to the beginning, or further higher in the draft law here. Further towards this beginning. That's what I was trying to get out of my... and it very clearly states now that a building permit shall be required for the installation of all solar energy systems, regardless of type. You need to go to the building department, get a permit from the CEO. That typically happens today, but I think that's a very valuable thing to call out and make very clear. And then it just goes on saying that all this language that is here highlighted is modified because it's moved. There was no addition or other change to that section, I don't believe. Is that correct?
There was not.
All right. All right, the next item was in F, and this is just a question I had about the building integrated stuff, which remains a scary one for me. Building integrated systems integrated into new or existing buildings other than 1-2 family dwellings are subject to site plan or special permit approval in the same manner as the building in which they are installed. So I might be the only one that has a fear of this product type. Leo, you might know better what's out there, what is commercially available now, whatever. Because I don't have a good handle in my head over what exactly we're talking about with these building integrated systems, my recommendation is that we just have mandatory planning. I mean, it might be a mandatory planning board site plan approval, basically, for any installations of that type. Is that excessive? Is that overly?
Only because you were very anxious to have the residential as unencumbered as possible, and I think that the idea of the building integrated photovoltaic systems is that they look like part of the building, it's just that they have solar capacity.
Right.
So I think the thinking was that if on a residential building you used a type of window or a siding that actually had solar capabilities, but it was basically just a different material on the outside, that we shouldn't make too much of a, we shouldn't make it too difficult. I don't have any problem with the planning board reviewing it, but it's really not a site thing. It's really more of a, it's really just a material issue. So I don't know. I mean, I could sort of go either way on that, Nina.
I think the planning board is not going to be in a position to opine or review things that are integrated into the building fabric, right? That's just not, it's just not their role. Their role is to take a look at the, basically sort of the structure and how that structure fits on the parcel. So I think if there's a lot of uncertainty as to the technology, it's probably safer to just, if you're not comfortable with it in here at all as a definition or a use, it's probably safer to just remove it altogether, wholesale, until the technology is at such a point where it's more commonplace. We tried to be a little bit more forward-thinking about this, and so recognizing that technology was going to change, and there may be things that just haven't been thought of or aren't, popular on the market right now. We're sort of ahead of the game, but if the concern is that, fundamentally the law is supposed to be based in public health and safety.
Yeah, and I think it's...
So I just think if you're not comfortable with it, then we should just take it out. It shouldn't be included in the use table. It shouldn't be included as a definition.
How does everyone else feel?
I think if it's already integrated in the product that you're normally using as a regular building material, that is just your choice, and it's already been rated for safety, and it's just a thing that you decide to choose for your window replacement.
Presumably. Damien, I don't know how this stuff is going to evolve.
Yeah, that's exactly my point, right?
I think we either decide that we're going to, take our chances one way or the other. Either that we're going to assume that this will kind of continue in the line, in the way that it's been developing, or we just wait until we know more.
I think we should try to be forward-thinking about it, I think. With a lack of information about what it is that we're actually talking about here, because a lot of it doesn't yet exist, it's not a mature technology yet, I was suggesting that we try to maybe treat this a little more restrictively than we treat other installation types, right? Like roof-mounted solar panels are a very common standard thing. The products that would fall into this category are, I don't know what they all might be, so that's all.
They're built into the existing envelope
Building
of the
envelope,
home, right? So they don't have a site plan impact. They're not taking up, they're not, impervious coverage, right? They don't, so the planning board would be like, I don't know what you want me to do with this, right?
I'm kind of in the same boat. So if you guys are comfortable with how this is drafted, I am. I just wanted to flag my concern about the types of products that might fall into this, and then the resulting way that they would be treated by.
I guess if we find in the future that something comes out that we find horrifying, I think we can maybe revisit this. But at the moment, it seems like everything that I mean, most of these things are designed to look like roof shingles, or designed like a regular window, or clapboard or something, because that's kind of what the public wants. So I think it's all seems pretty benign to me now, and if that changes, I think we can revisit it. But at the moment, it just seems to me it encourages people to buy these things when there's a choice between something that does have solar capabilities and something that doesn't.
Yep, okay. I will defer to legal opinion on how that's handled. So as long as you're comfortable, Ian, then I'm good with the way that's currently handled. And I would withdraw my comments, my requested changes to the use tables and how they are handled.
So how would the board then want to, or if the committee would like to weigh in, how would they like to see building integrated in the use tables? How would they want that to appear?
I think it's permitted, like, it's in there now as permitted as of right. I think we would.
It is, there's a
couple of exceptions about, let's get to the use tables at the end, because we could do them all together.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
All right, then next is on page 6, Leo's comment about height. Actually, I had a comment on that section as well. My comment was just a question for Ian, which was what exceptions are defined in the referenced section at the very end of that paragraph. So it just references exceptions that are in this thing, but I don't know what.
So that section of the code is the supplementary dimensional regulations. The exception that's relevant to roof-mounted systems reads, height exceptions. Barn silos, solar energy systems, telecommunication towers, wind energy conversion system may exceed the height limits in the dimensional table, provided that they comply with applicable sections of this article, and provided that for every 1 foot by which such structures exceed the height limit, the minimum setback are increased by 1 foot. So that it kind of steps back like that. So if you're exceeding the height limit, it's 35 feet, you want to go 36, you have to set it back. For every 1 foot, you have to set it back 1 foot.
Right.
1 foot, 1 foot.
And I guess my confusion on that was just that if the rule is 12 inches, the solar panels can increase the height of a building by 12 inches. It means that if a building is built to the maximum height, it's only exceeding that by 12 inches.
Right.
So I didn't really see the point of
kind of
making that change.
Yeah.
I mean, unless there's something I'm missing that's sort of more substantial, but it just seemed like insignificant to me.
I mean, based on that regulation, if you're exceeding the height limit, if you have a 12-inch panel, 12-inch distance between the height of the roof, you have to set it back right now by 12 inches.
Yeah.
Right? That's the requirement. That's what the law currently requires.
Right.
So,
Okay. Well, that doesn't
so it's
seem-
consistent and it's
Doesn't seem to
fine.
be a hardship anyway.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I'm just wondering now if there's a conflict with the fire safety code. Because I know the fire safety code specifies that you have to have a fire path at 2 of the 4 edges that is X number of feet wide or whatever. The 1 foot setback wouldn't qualify, wouldn't be wide enough to be considered a path. So
in other words, that may be required anyway, but if they decide to put it at the top rather than at the bottom, then it's still important, I think, to set it back a foot. I mean, then it would still be mandated to set it back a foot, but I don't think it certainly wouldn't supersede the fireman's access.
Right.
Because that sort of would overrule this.
yeah, okay, yeah, it's a little confusing, but I get it. Thank you for addressing my question there. The next section 3, we made a bunch of edits to this one, and again, this is with, my goal here is just to try to regulate roof-mounted solar the same way that the town currently considers a roof replacement. And there's a few different reasons for that, but basically you're not increasing the footprint of the building, you're not increasing the reflectivity of it, you're not doing anything but putting panels on the roof. And a lot of the stuff that was in this section addressed aesthetics, which is fine, but the implications of the addressing it would potentially increase cost and make it less easy for folks to purchase and install. So we removed
Can I just say something? So based on that, right, just to be fair, we fundamentally disagree that all components of the code that regulate aesthetics of the panels that we should gut all of that stuff in there. Not only because all of the guidance documents that we reviewed, NYSERDA, the New York State Code, all the codes of all the other municipalities, SHPO's guidelines, like you name it, we looked at it, all recommend that there should be some balance between the right of the property owner to install the panels on their property or their roof or their yard, and the right of the neighbor or the person driving by to not have to be impacted by their installation. So I think, there is, while Damien's point is that there's a presumption by regulating the aesthetics that they're somehow objectionable from a visual perspective, there's also the subjective determination that they're not, right? And so what we tried to do was achieve a balance between letting people do what they want with their property and being neighborly to your, friends and other colleagues. So we went through this. We think it's a bad idea. Most of the other people, the guidance documents, most of the other codes that we looked at also think it's a bad idea to take out any like landscape buffers or fencing. And just to also point out that it's not a roof, it's something that's mounted on the roof, right? And so it's regulated differently in a lot of different ways. But I mean, it's like saying, this is a wall, this is something that's added to the wall, this is not wall. It's something that's added to the wall.
I understand that, but you guys...
The same logic applies.
Clearly, we're not...
So what parts of this are you
So we
objecting to?
think, the language that says, to reduce visual impact, to require a fence or a landscape buffer, that sort of thing, those things should stay in.
Let's go through each and every single one together. So
If I could just make one comment. Visual impact is part of the secret process as well, and it would have to be.
So I get that.
It's a consideration that even in passing this would have to be addressed.
Of course,
So-
but that is exactly my point, is that we are going to, if we feel, as I do, that there is no visual harm, there's no aesthetic harm done to anyone by the application of this technology. And the reason I feel that way, clearly people have their own opinions, but trying to regulate everyone's different opinion in town is not really the business that I see local government to be in. Like, we have, we heard from Dee Dee earlier today, we have a state who's chasing a carbon zero mandate by 2040. I've said it 5 or 6 times on this board, there's a huge impact to home finances by being able to do this. I have a 3-year-old daughter. I am concerned about the future. I am fighting for this not because I have a weird interest in, I love the way the solar panels look. I'm fighting for this because I really do believe that this town should do the most it has to regulate these things from a safety standpoint, from a process standpoint. But all this other stuff, compared to the benefits of what this does, is inconsequential. And so going through it item by item, it starts by saying, solar energy equipment shall be installed inside walls and attic spaces where practical. And my concern when we had this conversation was, what does where practical mean? And who's going to be in the business of trying to judge that? Is it our code enforcement officer? Is it somebody who's unhappy with the CEO's opinion and then fights it? Does it go to the planning board? I don't want the town to be in the middle of a fight about what's practical on somebody's roof, because what benefit does that have to the town? It's just extra expense. For what? to keep it from being ugly. It doesn't seem worth the squeeze to me on that one. So
But visual is part of
It's part of zoning.
everything. Yeah, it's part of zoning. You just can't forget visual and throw it out. It's already
I'm
there.
not suggesting we do that. I specifically object to the way that this is because I don't know what it
I
means.
think this
so-
first section is fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think
We're fine with that.
when we
Let's
discussed
just-
it the last time, we
Okay,
were
so
Right,
let's leave that.
Let's move on to the next.
I mean, you started by saying you fundamentally object to every change in this
Well,
No,
section.
I didn't
can.
say every change.
Excuse me?
Well, she can object
Yeah.
to,
But
But
I
she
also
just said
didn't
she-
I mean, it
say,
isn't-
I didn't say every change.
no, she didn't say
Okay.
everything.
Okay.
And I'm fine with the next one in terms of, I'm just saying that the way it was written before, it was only for the front yard, because that was the way it was written in the model code. In other words, there weren't restrictions on the back and the side yards. But I'm fine to just say that for all sides of the roof, that it's just a maximum distance of 12 inches. That's
Yep,
fine.
we talked about that on the call. I think we're
That's
good with
fine.
that. That's fine.
So A and B are okay.
Yeah.
Are okay. 3C, Leo had a comment on that.
Yeah, my only concern with that was, we're sort of saying that, that rooftop mounted units in a residential situation are not ugly, or we're hoping that they're not ugly. So I wasn't sure most of the flat roofs are going to be on commercial buildings, not residential buildings. So I just wasn't sure. I mean, I think that the sightline issue is again common in virtually everything we looked at. But again, it just seems slightly inconsistent. But that's a very minor point. We can bypass that. That was just consistency.
Okay. It's fine. I mean, like a manufactured home would have a flat roof. They usually don't have a parapet. They're usually not very tall. So, if there's concern about overburdening those folks, I don't even know.
Well, what we discussed a long time ago was that the issue is the barrier, or is the fence, or is the screening with plants going to be more obtrusive than the panel itself? And, I mean, again, I think that's a very difficult call to make because different neighbors are going to feel very differently about that. But I think that we're covering the majority of cases here. And again, the code enforcement officer, I think, has some latitude in a situation like a trailer, which it seems to me would probably, look very peculiar if we added a parapet all the way around the top of it.
So are we on D?
We're on D.
We're on D.
Yeah.
B's. Wait.
D is fine. I feel like it's unnecessary, but I don't really have any objections to that.
Okay.
Okay, next page.
The next one is something we talked about in great length, which so
Where
here's,
are we?
We're on E. No, the striking of in no way will roof-mounted solar be permitted where snow or rain runoff will adversely affect public safety or adjacent property. And my general point here is that these are attached to an existing roof, and it's attached to an existing structure. There's no new roof. There's no new footprint. We're not moving the structure. So how is the addition of this solar panel going to change or negatively affect public safety or adjacent property? I feel like including this just gives another mechanism for complaints to be directed at.
Nina's point there was that in the same way that a metal roof sheds snow more easily than a shingle roof, that a glass or solar panel surface sheds snow even that much more easily, and especially if it's going to be dark underneath, so when the snow starts to melt, it can all release rather quickly. So I think this was really just a liability issue, was just making sure that again, this is addressed in terms of how drainage works, because it may not have to be, if it were a shingle roof and you suddenly put solar panels on it, the friction on that may be very different, and so the solution in terms of protecting people walking by or whatever from sheets of snow or from heavy rain would be different. And I just think we should make note that I think this is really just covering the town in terms of
It should stay
safety.
in. It should definitely
Yeah, it should stay.
So let me just then say that it's a blanket it's a blanket prohibition on roof-mounted solar anywhere where it will adversely affect public safety or adjacent property.
Maybe that's, maybe.
We suggested different language, right? In the little note, it says if the exact language, well, here's the, I mean, if the exact language is objectionable, we recommend any stormwater runoff would need to be managed on the subject property, and that's what New York State DEC requires anyway, so I think that covers it.
Right, so it wouldn't.
It's not a blanket
Right,
prohibition.
it wouldn't say that you can't have solar panels.
Yeah,
it
I'd
just
be
means
fine
that
with
the runoff needs to be addressed.
Right,
I'd be
Okay.
fine with that.
okay.
Do you have you got that change, Ian?
Yes.
Next.
Next, setback. My question was, why are we defining setback here if setbacks for accessory structures are already defined in the current zoning code?
I think, wait, doesn't that just say that we're using the setback requirements for an accessory structure? I thought that was actually changed to your language.
I don't, the top paragraph is, I'm talking about H1, and this is a question, this is not a concern, I just don't know what this means. So my question specifically is, so the paragraph says, ground-mounted solar are subject to setback requirements of the underlying zoning district, provided, however, that in zoning districts and zoning overlay districts, which have a minimum lot size of 5 acres, a minimum setback of 100 feet from any property line is required. And my question is, isn't this something that's defined in the current zoning code for accessory structures already, which is my assumption, but is this 100-foot minimum more or less restrictive than what is currently in the code for accessory structures?
I don't, is it, well, maybe you can answer that question first, Nina, because I think the point here was on a bigger lot, it probably is neighborly to pull the panels a bit further in from the edges. I mean, if there's that much room.
Yeah, so the two districts that are a minimum of 5 acres, well, so there's 3, the rural agricultural, the rural residential, and the manufacturing district. All of those have a minimum lot size of 5 acres. The 100-foot is bigger, deeper than what is currently required for your front yard setback. And it's the aggregate of the 2 sides add up to 100. So for consistency, given that they're large parcels, we just said, all right, if it's in the front, it needs to be set back by 100. If it's in either of the side yards, the aggregate is 100. So, cite it that way. But to answer your basic question, yes, the 100-foot minimum is greater than what is required in the underlying zoning code in the front yard only. And the reason is for
Okay, but we later say elsewhere ground-mounted can't be located in the front yard.
Yeah,
anyways.
well, right.
Right?
Yeah, but you have suggested that we strike that, so.
Well, and just so everybody has a little color on this, is if you want to build a shed or a freestanding garage on your property, our current zoning code regulates that already. There's square footage thresholds that determine whether or not you need a site plan. Am I getting this correct so far? I don't remember what the actual square footage threshold was, but my point is that we have code that currently governs this. And so what we're saying now is by introducing additional restrictions, we're basically saying, understood you want to put a ground-mounted solar panel on your property, we have determined that we are going to treat that differently than a shed because
It's not a shed.
I understand that it's not a shed.
Right? I mean, that's really it, right?
I understand, but what is it about? What is it about it that makes it not a shed? It's not the electrical. We already govern how it's going to be installed from a safety standpoint, but New York State governs that in its installation code. What we're saying
really the fundamental difference, right? I think I put it in here, is that our code regulates use, right? That's how our code is set up. It's a Euclidean code. If you want to regulate it by form, there's a way to do that. But the solar installation is a use, a shed is a use, it's a different use. So in some cases, yeah, it should be regulated in the same way that any other accessory structure does. But a shed is a building inside of which things are stored. It can be up to 45 feet tall in some areas. A ground-mounted solar system is infrastructure that's mounted on a bracket, and it would be ridiculous for us to allow a solar panel to be 45 feet high. So inherently, it's treated differently than any other accessory structure. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. And so what we've done is we said, all right, well, in the areas where it makes sense to be regulated like any other accessory structure, that's what's in here. But in some areas, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And so we've provided that here, too.
So look, the 45-foot tall solar panel is a bit of hyperbole. Like, there's no way a wind load would be, the cost to erect.
Well, then why don't we permit it? I mean, what's the point of permitting?
We don't have to permit it, but I'm taking a very philosophical approach to this.
I've
all right?
noticed, yes.
And is it time to go?
No, it's not that it's time to go. But
No, philosophical.
I think that you're really going into this a little bit too much. My sense is that these restrictions are quite reasonable.
Given 5
and
acres.
I have to agree
You've
with
got 5 acres to work
Right.
on.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got 5 acres, you can set it back.
100 feet is not a big deal.
That's fine. I don't disagree with that, but
Then why are we wasting time on it?
well, when we get into how it's applied on the use tables, that's where it really makes a big difference.
So we skip ahead to that?
Well, I think,
we can.
we understand and appreciate the philosophical approach, but I've sat on the planning board, Leah sat on the zoning board. We understand kind of how applications are processed through those boards and what those boards really need to see in the code in order to be like, all right, it meets XYZ, it does XYZ, good, check, move on. And to have uncertainty or a lot of discretionary decision-making
Right.
on behalf of the boards is a really bad idea.
I totally agree with
what
that.
we've tried to do is put stuff in here that says, you need to do this, you need to do that. It needs to be this tall, this far setback, this high, in order to give people certainty. Certainty for the person who wants to put it on
Sure.
their panel. They know exactly what they need to do. It makes it easier for the installer, makes it easier for the code enforcement officer, it makes it easier for the planning board. It takes it out of the ZBA so that they're not always in the middle of people's fights. And it regulates, like I said, it achieves a balance.
Nina, I agree with that. The concerns that I'm flagging sometimes are addressing the exact opposite of that. So certain
Okay.
things like including preferences that are not law, that seems to me that just introducing ambiguity that would create further headaches down the road for.
Okay.
So that we're on the same page here. I just
I'm not sure
the
that we
concept. Huh?
Well, it doesn't
I'm not
look
sure that
like
we
it.
are, but I get it, right? So you've had your comments, we've responded to them. Why don't we move on to the next one, the height? Ground-mounted solar systems are restricted to the height requirements of the underlying zoning districts. We think it should be 12 feet from the ground, under the solar panel to the highest point. That's reasonable, you said that's standard practice. It's unlikely due to a whole bunch of other factors that anybody's going to put ground-mounted solar panels that are more than 12 feet from the ground. So we think you should leave it. If you don't leave it, then it's subject to the underlying height restriction in the district, which
For an
could
accessory
be
structure.
35 or 45
Right.
feet, which is, impractical.
So we should leave that
Yeah.
as is.
Okay.
The 12 feet max.
All right, so then the next is the screening, and this I requested that it be removed again for the same reason that introducing this additional expense cost is the town making a value judgment about the weighted merits of what a ground-mounted installation might be. We don't require this for somebody who wants to put a shed in their side yard. We don't require it for other accessory structures. It's just an extra expense and penalty that we're directing specifically at ground-mounted for unclear reasons, in my opinion. So I would suggest we strike that.
Well, I don't think it's unclear, although I've agreed with what you said before, that I don't find ground-mounted units objectionable. In fact, I think it indicates that we're actually making some progress in terms of solar energy. But I've also been on the ZBA long enough to know that neighbors get hysterical about what their neighbors do. And if we don't address screening in some way, then it's just going to be a constant headache for the ZBA, because it isn't a shed, and rules for a shed are very clear, but we are making the value judgment that neighbors aren't going to find it objectionable to see solar panels. And I also agree that the fence or the screening may be much more objectionable than the panels, but I think we can't just say nothing about it. I mean, I think we have to figure out a way to word it so that the neighbors don't, come with pitchforks to the next ZBA meeting and the ZBA meeting after that and the one after that, because I've been on it too long to not realize that's going to happen.
So what would be an alternative to, instead of having all this stricken?
Well, I don't, I wish we could just say that the neighbors should work it out, because I think a lot of neighbors won't care if it's there. But I don't know that that's a legal option.
Well, guys, we also, you have to take the rights of the property owner into account equally as much as the neighbors' sensitivities. Like, that is, this is an unnecessary step to me. I don't think the town should be trying to, we've already said it has to be located in the side or the rear yard. We've already mandated the setbacks. Our current zoning code handles all.
Well, what if we just have this last sentence in that, Leo? The planning board has the authority to take the physical characteristics of the site into consideration, which it would do for any application.
Well, if it goes before the planning board, yes, right?
Right.
But Damien's suggestion is that ground-mounted solar systems be exempt across the board from having to go through site plan review. So it wouldn't.
Not across the board. No, that's not correct. But
yeah. I mean, that's what's reflected
in the
statement.
NYSERDA code and the other code that you looked at, were they exempt from the planning board?
Ground-mounted solar systems?
Yes.
No.
Well, they
there's
weren't.
also-
In the NYSERDA code and
the model code
and the model
doesn't
code
specifically address
they
that.
do like tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
Obviously, it does.
No, it
Right,
doesn't.
so
Victoria,
roof-mounted
I've
are
read it.
generally tier
Well, I
1.
would take their explanation over yours, because you're more philosophical. They know the nuts and bolts.
Well, I think if the issue that we're addressing is the visual impact or is the aesthetic issue, they are very kind of clear that this is an issue that comes up all the time. It's probably the one that comes up most often when towns are struggling with this law, is how to balance the right of the property owner to put it up with the right of everybody else to not have to look at them, right? Value judgments all around, right? Are they nice? Are they not nice? Is this great for the earth? Who cares? It's all injected in there. And that is why the state says, you know what? Put something in there that says if you put these up, if you put ground-mounted solar panels, on your property, you should put up a fence or a hedge.
But the state does not say that, just so you know.
The code says regulating visual and aesthetic impact is the single greatest debated topic.
Yes, it does say that.
With reference
But it
to
does not.
these.
It does not suggest that.
It does. It suggests that you have something in your code that allows for minimizing the visual impact of the panel. I don't know that it needs to be, I mean, we talked about this, right? Like, first it was, a hedge, then it was a fence, then it was, what do you do?
I agree that we should have something in our code to address the visual impact, and we do. We have setbacks, we have restrictions on where you can install what side of the yard. This, to me, is overboard. As a town-mandated planting regulation, it's specifically requiring that you put up plants and trees in front adjacent to your solar panel seems counterintuitive to me.
It doesn't say trees. I don't think trees will work because you don't want the shading.
I mean, it's not isolated, right, to this. There are plenty of other sections in the code that require landscape buffers
I
between
agree with,
different uses.
excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I agree with Victoria. The last sentence, I think, is fine. The planning board has the authority to take the physical characteristics of the site into consideration as it relates to the view and shed and screening required.
We could change it to code, that would only be for things that went in front of the planning board, so we could change it to
To the
although
word
I'm
enforcement
like code
officer.
enforcement officer, but I'm not sure that that's such a great idea. I mean, it's not in his purview really to be like, yeah, you know what, you need to put up edge or you need to put up a fence.
I
So,
think the
yeah.
last sentence actually can kind of qualify the initial requirements, because if you have a property where no neighbors could see it, a ground-mounted system.
Right, they'd be
then-
obligated
then
to
the-
do this anyways.
No, they would not. The planning board has the ability to
No, I'm
state
saying
that
with the way it's
they
written.
don't have to do it.
With the way it's written now, before we struck it, right? They would be obligated to put up plantings anyway, even if nobody could see it and nobody complained.
Depending on how we handle the use tables, yes.
Right.
Right.
So I'm fine with that, having the planning board have oversight over whether plantings
Well,
are
they do
screened.
anyway.
So wait a
That's
minute,
right.
on the use table, then the planning board is,
It's been changed. The most recent version had, it used to be site plan, right? It used to require site plan approval for ground-mounted solar systems in all residential districts and all business districts and community uses. The revised version that Ian circulated yesterday has permitted by right in all of those districts,
Not-
residential,
No.
Not HM.
No. Yes.
H,
Well, let's go to
that's
the use
site plan.
tables then
PS
quickly.
is site plan,
Oh, no, yeah. That's the one that required us.
only in the HM,
Correct.
right, in the hamlet.
And that was something that we had discussed on the phone call. That's why it remained.
But it's been eliminated, site plan approval has been eliminated in all residential districts,
other than the
which is
Right.
mixed, right?
And again, my concern there is that asking a homeowner to go in front of the planning board is no small request, right? There's costs associated that come with, time, like whatever additional expense you have. I mean, the town incurs costs. We have legal costs we incur. We're in the process of, negotiating a contract with Nina's firm to represent us on the planning board, and,
I have nothing to do with that contract, just clarify for the purposes, right?
That's
That,
fine.
that's neither here nor there.
Well, it's just, honestly, I say it that way
Let's
because I don't
stay on
know
the subject, please.
I don't know I don't
So,
remember the name
I
of
mean,
the
I
company, but-
understand the change, I just don't know that it's requiring site plan approval only for ground-mounted solar panels in the hamlet mixed use is still putting the onus on the homeowner, right, or the business owner, or whomever it is. It seems an arbitrary
you
decision
mean in the
to make.
hamlet it would.
Yeah.
In the hamlet,
Guys,
if
let me-
you require it across you either
So
require
I'm
it
not-
across the board and then have the planning board be like, you need to put a fence or you don't need to put a fence.
All I'm saying is you should have to go before the planning board, without exception, if you are trying to do this in commercial, anything other than residential. That's my suggestion.
But again, Damien, my concern is that the only people who are going to complain are people in a residential
Yeah.
neighborhood. I mean, that's where the conflict is going to be between two neighbors. I mean, it's not like if someone puts a ground-mounted solar thing in the backyard of an auto repair shop, for instance. I don't think it's going to be a big hue and cry. But I think that this issue of some people thinking it's totally okay to look at a solar array and other people like completely freaking out means that you're leaving it to the zoning board to deal with in every example.
I
mean,
understand
every
that.
case.
I get it. There's costs associated with that, and we have a lot of wealthy residents in our town, but a lot of folks are not, and cost is important. So there is
Why don't we take a look at possible ways to rephrase this so it readjusts
That's
the
fine, and we
balance
may want to visit the tier concept that is in the model law, right? Do you want to describe the tiers?
It's an entirely different structure, so I'm not sure that it's even worth discussing here, right? How they regulate, it's by generation of power.
Right, it's by
Right.
size. So
Yeah, so
what-
that's
what-
not something that the town is in a position to be able to
I understand, but the
regulate.
implications of that, Nina, is that we blanket regulate even small, like, 4 panel, 1 stand
So maybe we do
installations.
it that way, right? Maybe we say if your ground-mounted solar panel exceeds a certain size or coverage or whatever it is, then you could put it, then it would be best practice to put up a fence or a hedge or something. If you want to regulate it by like land area or footprint or something like that where...
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, something like that. And then, if it's going to be a very big, installation, then, you obviously have the wherewithal to do that. So
Right.
you could put up a fence or a couple of hedges around it to make sure that you're not.
Okay, well,
Or we just
Pissing
ask
off your
the homeowner to get a sign off from their neighbors that they're
Still
okay with that.
the buddy
streaming.
system.
What?
It's still less than 50% of the footprint of
Yes,
the principal
it has to
structure.
be. Right.
So you're talking about something that could be quite large
Yes.
as far as the size of panels.
Sure.
Panel is,
I just want to be clear that, there's been a lot of, at least 10 times throughout this conversation, be like, do it like the model law, do it like the model law. There are times when we're not doing it like the model law, and it's more restrictive than the model law. And the model law starts out by saying that this is not intended to be adopted verbatim by any town in the state of New York. It literally says that at the very outset. It says you have to tailor it to your own town's uses and current situation. So, let's just...
That's what we're doing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What do you want
How do you
Oh,
feel about
for
that,
screening.
Damien, as sort of like assuming that, it's already, the size of the ground-mounted solar system is already limited to be 50% of the footprint of the house, and that's assuming that you're not exceeding the coverage requirements for the underlying zoning district, which is the other reason to have these go through site plan review. But assuming that, right, so you had a, 10,000 square foot house, your solar panels can't exceed 50% of that, that's 5,000 square feet. If we said, all right, anything greater than 40% of the building footprint would require a screen that would be landscape or a fence or something like that.
Or we could think of it as percentage of lot size, because it might be a huge lot, and that, we can think about it. I just, the blanket mandate is just the problem that I have.
I mean,
with
we
that.
can
It's
certainly
not-
try to, we'll
it's
think
not
about
a-
ways to.
But I don't think we should take
propose
out the
language.
screening altogether.
Yeah, we'll come up with some language and we'll run it past you.
Okay, where are we now?
6, well, again, was one of these. The ground-mounted solar shall be placed in such a way to balance the benefit to the property owner with the adverse impacts to neighboring properties. Very noble statement. It makes all the sense in the world. I just don't know what it means specifically, and so I'm not sure how that's
Well, we talk
enforced.
about a balance all the time.
I understand.
The benefit to the landowner and the detriment to the adjoining property owners and the public. I mean, that's what you talk about. There's a balance.
Yeah.
And you have to strike the proper balance. That's what we're trying to do with
How
this.
do you regulate that, right? That's my question. Like, if somebody's going and putting a site plan together, or they're proposing an installation to the CEO, what does he do when he reads that? And he says, all right, you want to put your ground-mounted solar here.
Well, we had a fellow here tonight that talked about reasonable.
Yes.
You have to be reasonable with these things, and if a reasonable man were to believe that this is really obtrusive, then I think that's how you regulate it. If something is going to be basically found to be unreasonable by, I think, most reasonable people, then I think that that's something that should not stand. And that's where you talk about the balance. I mean, there's a benefit to the landowner, but there is a corresponding detriment to the adjoining landowners and the public. And you have to try and strike that balance.
I get it. Again, I just don't know how that's enforced, and my fear is that gives excessive weight to the squeaky wheel, to the
Well,
complaining
it
neighbor.
may be enforced by a judge at some point because somebody brings a lawsuit that it's a nuisance.
So 6,
So,
So I shall be placed, I'm assuming means where they're sited on the lot, right?
correct?
I don't, I would maintain that, because I don't really understand what it means that we strike it, but I understand what you're saying, Jim, so if
We move on?
Okay.
So is that staying?
Yes.
All right, we already talked about the side rear yard.
We're okay with it staying in the side or rear yard, that's just good planning, right? I mean, to the extent practicable.
So H, we're all taking
H is
out?
the one that we moved.
Yep.
So
Okay.
there's no, it's not that we struck that language, we just moved it to
So
the
we're up
top.
to page 10?
Page 10.
Setback?
You could take this one.
Setback, correct.
It's hard.
Solar field systems, I think there was some confusion, Ian. But, so the objection is not that there should be setback requirements for solar fields. The objection that I had, mainly again, because I didn't understand it, but the planning board, when imposing additional restrictions, may take into consideration where the solar field system is located, such as adjacent to the historical preservation overlay or the scenic protection overlay. And my comment was like, if we are concerned about those overlays exist, and things that are governed by those overlays fall inside the boundaries of those existing overlays. What we're saying here is that now the considerations of what happens in those overlays is now extended beyond the boundaries of the overlays, which seems inconsistent with our zoning code. So I was confused by that, and I recommended we strike it.
I think that the scenic protection overlay is based on areas that are supposed to be protected because they're visible or they're important to the character of Amenia. So I think all this is saying is that the planning board has the opportunity to look at the HPO and the SPO in considering siting, which they have to do for a solar field system anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the reason that we have those overlay districts in the first place is because, again, the comprehensive plan made a big point of trying to preserve the rural character.
I
So-
get it, Leo. We agree with that, but what this is specifically saying is that outside of the scenic protection overlay, outside of the HPO, we now have this additional consideration in consideration of what happens inside the SPO. And that seems weird to me. It seems like it's, the interest that the town took in preserving the SPO has now bled out of the boundary of the SPO and is now affecting adjoining properties. That seems a little scary to me. That's the reason I recommended strike it.
Well, again, I think that the planning board, who tends to be, not particularly interested in these two districts anyway, in my experience, I think that, they clearly, it's just something that they should look at, that they should be aware of. I mean, I don't think it's saying that, if someone's putting in a solar field, it has a really big impact. I mean, it's a big operation. And if you put the solar field adjacent to Amenia Union, for instance, it overwhelms Amenia Union. So, I mean, I think it's worth considering. I don't think it's a small issue.
Right, but if I was a landowner who was adjacent to that overlay but not in it, and then somebody came and told me that I was all of a sudden subject to that overlay, I would be pissed. So
and I tell you to move to Fishkill, but whatever, Again, I'm just following I'm basically just following the comprehensive plan, the intent of the comprehensive plan in terms of maintaining rural character. And I think that, that siting a solar field is a really big deal.
I agree.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that as part of the seeker process, applicants that want to do large-scale solar systems would have to go through that process. It's a type 1 action.
Absolutely.
And they would have to take a look at the visual impact, not only to that property, but to adjacent properties. This is saying, you know what? We get it, you're going to have to go through the seeker process for this anyway, but pay particular attention to where these things are located next to what we have as a town has identified as something important to preserve.
Absolutely.
That's it. You're going to have to do it anyway, so now it's in the law.
I 100%
Damien,
understand
what if
that.
we change the language to say, the planning board, when considering the imposition of additional restrictions, would that help you?
Yeah, I'm not the lawyer. My concern with this section was a legal concern. That was my concern with this section. It was not
Well,
concerned
Jim
with...
made a suggestion.
I do, and so I
I
think
want
if you're...
people to comment on
that. But do you understand what my fear is? Is like,
Yeah, I hear you.
All right.
I don't
What-
have the
what do you
same fear,
think,
but I
Ian?
hear you.
So
Ian?
I don't,
Jim?
what's the?
Jim,
the
could you?
suggestion?
The planning board, when considering the imposition of additional restrictions, may take into consideration.
I don't know if that's any different than what it already says.
They're not imposing, they're considering imposing it.
Oh, when considering imposing.
Why don't we just take out when imposing additional restrictions? May take into consideration where it is.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have that handled however the lawyers would like that handled. I don't have,
I don't have a problem with that, Victoria.
Okay, good. Me neither. Yay.
guys, I know this has taken a long time. It has taken
Where are we going next?
many, many hours.
There's not a lot
the last
ahead of us.
month of my life.
Could we please move on?
All right. What?
Okay, I understand.
The only
No, I
thing
just-
that's
I mean,
left
I
are the
just-
use tables, right?
Now where we go?
We're going to the use table, aren't we?
We're going to
Yeah.
the use tables?
Yeah.
Let's go to the use tables. All right, so the first is the residential uses. P is permitted by right, so roof mounted is permitted by right across the board for all residential uses, meaning they have to go get a building permit, but they do not have to go before the planning board. Building integrated photovoltaic, I raised my concerns about that before already. If everybody else is happy with it just being a building permit, that's fine with me. I have no problem with that. And then it's a little hard to read here, but the stricken S's are the item that we were talking about before with Leo and Nina. So my recommendation is that in RA, RR, HR, and SR, ground mounted is permitted by right, and of course subject to all the existing accessory use regulations as well as the
So you want,
additional.
what do you want changed from PS to P?
The only PS that would remain would be HM.
Which doesn't
Which
seem
is-
to make a lot of sense to me, but.
I thought, Damien, you were saying that you thought the planning board should review the ground-mounted systems when we were talking about that.
For
And I thought that was,
every other use, for business and for community uses.
I'm sorry, say that again? So planning board,
The-
site
the
plan
cha-
approval would be required for ground-mounted solar systems in which district?
HM. And not permitted at all in HC, OC, or M.
Yeah, that's what was there already. We had
That's-
recommended that site plan approval be required for ground-mounted systems in the residential districts.
Right, and my recommendation was that we obligate a building permit for a building permit as opposed to planning board review for RA, RR, HR, and SR.
Damien, I'm sorry, maybe I'm completely confused, but I thought you had said that in the issue of the screening, for instance, it wasn't, it was something that the planning board would deal with in site plan review.
Yeah.
But then they're not doing site plan review if you.
They are for HM.
That's
Well,
it.
but that's the only district. I mean, that doesn't,
It's probably
that doesn't really solve the problem
Guys,
for
we're
most
having,
neighbor
look,
situations.
we're having a conversation, and however the other members of my board feel here is fine, but that was my recommendation, was building permit for residential. You're a homeowner, you go get a building permit. If you're in RA, RR, HR, or SR. And if you're in HM, which as Nina aptly pointed out is Hamlet, and it's mixed commercial and residential, that's more complicated, that should go before the planning board.
I didn't say it was more complicated. I actually said that
I
it
said
should be
it was-
flipped.
Okay.
That if you're going to require site plan approval, it would make more sense to require it in the residential districts for residential uses, because that's where you're most likely to run into the, sort of balancing of impact. In the commercial district, there's an expectation that you may be living, your shop or your apartment above your shop is going to be located to something that has a kind of a businessy type vibe. But in the residential districts, less so. So That was our recommendation, that you require site plan approval for ground-mounted systems in residential uses in residential districts.
So that was the proposed change for that. And then solar fields in residential uses are all, they all have to go before the planning board. And then business uses, again, roof mounted in business is permitted by right. Just go to the building department, get a building permit. Same with building integrated. And ground mounted, my recommendation was to have it all go before the planning board. But
I'm sorry, to have all of what go before the planning?
all business ground mounted.
That's not what this says.
I know that's not what this says. I believe that's an error, I think. Could be. But that's, and my feeling there is just like, it's a commercial use. It will probably be bigger, you know,
But these are commercial uses in residential districts, right? That's what this is. So if you have a shop
Right.
in a residential zone, then you have to go in front of the planning board. But if you have a home in a residential zone, you don't.
my concern.
That's what this, that's
That's
how
what that
this
would
is
do.
going.
My concern was that if you're running any business on your property, then the needs, the installation might be larger, might be bigger, might be worth. Like if you're doing it for
You're
commercial
still
purposes.
limited by this. I mean, in the residential district, if you have a commercial use in a residential district, you're limited by the same footprint coverage as you would be a residential use. So
Right.
it won't likely be bigger. It'll be the same regulations as it would be in a residential zone.
I don't feel strongly about that. I just thought that if it was going to be a commercial use, there should be a second set of eyes on it, but I don't feel strongly about that. And then, community uses, basically the same deal. Roof mounted permitted by right as this building integrated, and then ground mounted. Again, my recommendation there was planning board for all those. Community use, again, for me it was.
Also, for the town, you're exempt from it. Like, so if the town wanted to do it, you're exempt from zoning anyway.
Right.
So
But they
community
have-
uses, I think, are defined in our code as like churches or schools or things like that.
Okay, I may have misunderstood that. So there's a, New York State is promoting a solar co-op situation where you can put a big array out and then your neighbors can participate in the funding of it, and then you can all share the net metering benefits and all that. I thought community use might fall under that.
That's a community system. This is, community
Okay.
uses is defined by our code, which is, generally public, institutional type uses.
Okay.
Museums.
But how would that be? I mean, wouldn't a community thing be a solar field?
No, so if you had a school that wanted to put up solar panels, or the town, again, is exempt, but if you had a museum or a school or
But if
a
a group of-
college,
but if
The fire departments would qualify
fire
as a community.
departments wanted to put up solar panels, they're regulated the same way. We said that they should go through site plan approval. This has been changed a little bit, but it's the use, right? It's the institutional use. It's not the community grid type system,
Okay.
which is regulated as a
As a
solar
solar
field.
field.
Right, and
Right.
that's why I guess where I get confused, because I
Yeah.
thought it was
Okay.
addressing that. So then I'm fine with that. And then the next use table is the overlay districts. It's permitted by right.
Is there a consensus on?
We didn't decide, yeah.
Do we have a consensus on what we want to do with the ground-mounted solar energy systems? Whether they're permitted as of right, or if they require site plan?
In residential
residential
uses
districts.
in residential districts. So our recommendation was that it goes through site plan. Damien thinks it just should be permitted by right. That's what's kind of on the table for
Yeah,
discussion.
I think that's the only conflict we have here.
Right.
So, right. So again, specifically in RA, RR, HR, and SR, my recommendation is the ground-mounted be permitted by right, subject to all of our current zoning and the additional restrictions that we've implemented into this law. But asking a homeowner to adhere to all of this the setbacks, the placement, the siding, everything that we, and on top of that, have to go to the planning board, seems overly burdensome for a homeowner who's trying to install what is likely to be a relatively small array.
Or could be really big.
It can't be too big because homeowners, and they're not commercial use, they're limited to installing an array that is
50% of the size of their home.
50% of the size of their home, but NYSEG won't let you install anything that produces more than 110% of your historical production. So that's the other limiting factor that's not addressed anywhere in here, and that.
Completely off the grid, though.
But what if like so if you had a humongous home, right? You had a huge footprint. I don't know, what's the biggest home? What's the one that's like on what? On like Smithfield Road, 15,000 square feet, and you were generating power for that 15,000 square foot home and your barn and whatever other accessory structure you had on your pool, your
Guys,
tennis court, your
get
indoor
it.
golf
I
driving
am
range.
so less worried about those guys than I am about
I
a
know,
small,
but the same rules
like,
apply, right? Same rules apply.
There's so many like homes in this town that are $160,000, $180,000, $200,000, and the type of investment and the benefit of solar. I mean, first of all, we've talked about this already. Nobody who is tight on funds would go the ground-mounted route unless they were absolutely obligated to do so.
How much more expensive is that than
It's
roof
significantly more expensive. You have to pour concrete, you have to trench, you have to get the
So
mounts.
why wouldn't you make them go through site plan review?
What?
Well, if these are the people with the wherewithal
No, I'm not saying that these
to
are
be
the-
doing a ground-mounted, so, I mean, you're
Again-
saying like, you're not worried about the guy who has boatloads of money?
That's right.
We're not worried about them either, we're worried about everybody the same. Whether you have $1 million or $2,
I
we have
agree.
the same rules should apply to
I
everybody.
agree with that, and what I'm saying is that given that people are of different means and may take different approaches, we have gone out of our way in our existing zoning code and we've gone out of our way in our existing zoning code and in this document to introduce some additional restrictions on ground mounted. So asking a homeowner to then take that extra step and go for the planning board is unnecessary in my opinion. That's my opinion.
I think Nina's point was that if ground-mounted is more expensive than roof-mounted, then presumably someone who's of limited means would go for a roof-mounted system.
I think
Where
about.
they could just breeze through the process by right. Right?
Sorry?
Where they would not be required to go through site plan
That's a good
review at
point.
all. Right?
Why would they not be?
Because they have
Because
roof
they do
mounted.
If they have roof mounted.
Oh, no,
If
no,
they
I
have
guess,
less money.
dude, guys, the only reason you would do ground mounted if you,
Couldn't.
as opposed, huh?
If you couldn't put roof panels.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's the only reason you would do it. So
Right.
it's like the homeowner's already struggling with an untenable situation, and then it will have to occur. I don't know why. That's my opinion. You guys can disagree.
I don't understand why going before the planning board is such a big deal if that gives an opportunity for the screening, which seems to be very important to certain people and not so important to others. And that gives a chance before you install it to take into consideration the topography, the scenic protection overlay, the view from the road, the view from the church, or whatever, the Tiffany windows just beyond. I don't know what all comes on. But I don't feel it. We looked at solar, that going before the planning board, I don't think I'd have to hire a lawyer. I don't think I'd have to hire, I shouldn't have to. I should be able to go to the building zoning guy, and he should be able to tell me very quickly that I just need to do these things, and then go to the planning board without a lawyer, without an engineer, without a survey or anything done prior, and just be able to, on a back of a paper, sketch out what I plan to do. It'll be 100 feet from the whatever, and the 100 feet from there, and the building and zoning guy should be able to tell me 90% of what I'm going to have to do. Then I go to the planning board, and they should be able to say, yeah, but you know what, your neighbor, given the topography, you may want to put it over here. And then before you put and sink this thing all in as a permitted right, that met the letter of the law, then you've got a neighbor who says, you know, if you just put it over 10 feet, I wouldn't be looking at it out on my porch. I don't know. It's just my opinion, but I do get angry when people think that going before the planning board should require a lawyer and an engineer and a survey done beforehand. I don't think it's always necessary, right? People think they have to, but they shouldn't have to.
Vicki, notwithstanding the fact that I think that lawyers should be able to make a living, I agree with you.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, well.
Well, there used to be a time you can go to the planning board and get a review.
And I agree with you also, Vicki. I really think that they have to go for other things. What's the big hassle? They know they have to,
You're going to put $20,000 into this installation, spend 1 minute.
And make sure you're
thinking about.
Yes, make sure it's going to be okay.
So having gone both to the CEO and had to sketch a site plan on the back of a napkin and show our enforcement officer where I wanted to put my deck.
Yeah.
Having heard from numerous people who have had to go before the planning board, to me it seemed, I've never had to go before the planning board myself. So from what I've heard, it is not as easy as going to the building department and getting a building permit. Frequently, it does require the investment in additional documentation or support staff. But look, we don't need to belabor the point there anymore. What do you guys want to do with that? You want all ground mounted in residential to require a planning board review? Because that's what Nina and Leo are suggesting. I'm suggesting building permit for residential and planning board for everything.
Then for landscaping, we'd have to say building and zoning officer or the planning board as applicable would be able to impose the requirement of screening, appropriate screening.
If you don't require site plan as part of the ground-mounted system, then you have to give some authority to the building inspector to review it. I think we should probably also add that almost all of the plans that you would need to produce just to go to the building inspector are the same ones you're going to provide to the planning board. So you're not going to have to do a whole lot of work. In order to put these in, you're going to have a site plan. It's going to have to show where they are relative to the setbacks. It's going to have to show all that to go into Mike's office.
Right.
So it's not like the planning board's going to say, hey, and the planning board has a lot of discretion to be like, you know what, you don't need all these other things that are listed under the site plan approval requirements. They can say like, we don't need a wetland survey, we don't need, the 20 other things.
Sure.
They can say, you know what, this package that you produced for Mike Siegelcan is fine, it's sufficient, but you have a neighbor or whatever. We have some discretion. We can take a look at it and say, hey, here's a circumstance where you may want to consider putting in a hedge or something.
That sounds like an ideal scenario. My objection to going before the planning board is not because I have anything against the planning board. It's because my assumption is that there is additional cost. There is certainly the additional cost of time to somebody to do that.
Right.
So if there is zero additional cost to anybody to have to go and present to the planning board, there is certainly cost to the town, but if we're okay with that, we're okay with that. Then I don't really have an objection here. I am trying to make it as equally as expensive in either option, and that's fine.
Okay, so
What about,
So we just need to decide, this is the last three things, we just need to decide.
no, I'm going to decide this thing here. So what do we decide, that we just...
we're looking at the use table.
No, what Vicki said about going to the planning board, and you said to go into the planning board. Have we resolved that one section?
We're still,
No, I think that's
you
what
guys have to
that's
sort
what
out.
you have to sort of make a decision.
Okay,
But there's only one more thing after this.
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Leo.
It's a big one.
It's a huge cost. Believe me, we looked at all the different ways we might do it, and I don't think going before the planning board would be a deal breaker for me. In our situation, I don't know about other people, but I think it would make sense when you're putting in that kind of infrastructure, and that you want to just make sure that
I think we're assuming that it's,
If it needs
let's,
screening, it needs screening, and they might just say, look, for everybody's peace of mind, you could
sure. So
move it here behind the knoll, or...
think about somebody in the rural residential zone who's got a little, tiny little barn or a farm, and it's not connected to their house. They want to put up a, you know, the smallest possible ground-mounted array that you can do just to run a well pump or have some lights in a potting shed or something. I don't know. But what we're saying here is that you have to go to the planning board if you
If
want
you're
to
in
do
a
that.
rural residential zone, you have 5 acres. Right?
Okay.
So
That's,
it's a lot of latitude. right, where you
there
can
is
put
a
it.
lot, but it's just the step of going to the planning board. That's the only.
No, I mean, I think
I'm not going to
it's
die
not-
on this hill. I don't really care.
Right,
I
I
am-
hear you. I
it's
just think there's a presumption here that it's like a huge pain in the neck and a tremendous expense and tons of time to go through the planning board. If you come into the planning board with this, like this is what your code requires, this is what it should be, you should be in and out of that board in one meeting, literally. It's the people that come in and they like either don't understand the code or they haven't gotten clear direction or the code is unclear that they're like, I don't know. And then the planning board has to say, oh, you have to provide us this, that, and the other thing. We need, you know, people to review it to make sure you have a complete application. It's not an onerous process. It's just another set of eyes. It's basically it.
I'd like to put this to bed. I mean, how do we feel about it? I don't agree with Damien. I think that we should have planning board approval on all of them.
All ground mounted.
Yes, I do.
Well, let's-
I don't know how
let's
everybody
try
else
it.
feels, but I don't think we
I
could
do.
argue this thing all night
Yeah.
long and never get out of here.
Well, no, we're waiting for opinions, so that's helpful.
That's mine.
So-
That's mine too.
Site
okay.
plan
Then we
approval.
have
Site plan across the
a
board.
majority on that, and we can move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The business uses, I suggested planning board review for all ground mounted. That was my suggestion. Everybody,
I
Yep.
agree.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
okay.
Okay, noting that that's not what's reflected in the table, Ian.
I
That
know,
is-
we have to
We just
I'm
change
making
it back.
notes. I got it all.
Okay.
Thank you, Ian.
And then I misunderstood community here, so what's my original recommendation here was all ground mounted goes before the planning board. For this, what do you guys recommend, given that community uses are not what I,
I think planning board, I think the
Great.
should stay. Bigger use, bigger, you know, footprint, all that.
any objections on the board?
Nope.
Okay. Then finally is the overlay districts. Now keep in mind, we have like 2 layers of zoning assignment in the town. We have your underlying zoning, and then these overlay districts sit on top of that. So you could be both rural residential as well as scenic protection overlay at the same time. So permitted by right for roof mounted, I had suggested,
What is FPO?
sorry?
What's FPO?
Floodplain.
Oh,
Floodplain.
Stream corridor.
Okay.
Scenic protection, historic preservation,
Aquifer.
aquifer, manufacturing, soil mining, resort
Resort.
development, and mixed.
Hamlet.
So
Hamlet, which is
my-
DDSO.
Given the roof mounted being permitted by right pretty much everywhere else in the previous use table, my recommendation was the same here, just permit roof mounted by right. There's no, we're not changing the building envelope at all, and it's not without significant implication that you require an extra step by assigning planning board for these. So that was my recommendation, except for RDO, which is mandated. That's the resort district. So that was my recommendation. Planning board for RDO and building permit for roof mounted elsewhere.
I'm sorry, you mean for scenic protection overlay, HPO, and
RDO.
And RDO, it would be
Site.
permitted instead of site plan?
Yes.
Okay.
But-
Okay, so that isn't what's on the table.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's some inconsistency,
So
but that's
our
what-
suggestion was that roof mounted be required to go through site plan in the SPO, the HPO, and the others are fine. I can't tell, in the SMO, soil mining, we're saying it's just permitted by right, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we recommended that in the SPO and HPO, you need to go through site plan approval because that's consistent with the underlying zoning regulations in those districts.
The SMO doesn't?
Soil mining,
Yeah,
I mean, if you have, what's there going to be like
And what
a little
about
shed or
RDO?
something in there? Resort development, you got to go through site plan approval
for
anyway.
anything.
The same is actually true for SPO and HPO, so that's why we said
Well,
you
that's
have
not,
to do it.
that's not necessarily true. Like,
It's not necessarily true if you believe that a solar panel on a roof is a roof, but if you believe that a solar panel that's installed or attached to a roof is actually something that's attached to a roof, then if it exceeds a certain square footage, you need to go to through the SPO, right? need to
yes,
go through
correct.
site
If it's a new, the square footage requirement addresses
An
new
addition.
footprint. Yeah,
Not
addition.
new footprint, just an addition.
An addition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then residential?
So here's just, I wanted the board to understand the implications of that. So do you know how many residential houses are in the SPO and the HPO?
The ones that were mapped by Dutchess County Planning didn't take, we asked them to generate a new map for us, which I don't think we ever got, right?
No.
But did you get that? You said you got a map from them.
I had
Did
them
you get
run a
map?
report.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what did they run?
We had a report of, look,
So I had a report because basically what the town's saying is that if you own a home, you can put solar panels on your roof, and you go to get a building permit, and that's it. Except if you're in the SPO or the HPO. And my recommendation is that we just treat them all the same, because I don't feel it changes anything. But there are in the SPO a total of 451 lots. 202 of them are residential. And in the HPO, there's 250 total and 166.
But of
of them.
those parcels that are in the SPO that are zoned residential, how many of those have a house on them?
I excluded all vacant from the count. So the count I just gave you excludes
So they
all
have-
vacant.
And all of those have houses that are located in the SPO?
That's
Because
the
there's a-
great question, and
Right.
there's no good way to determine that.
Well, that's what I think we asked them to do that, right? The nexus of the underlying aerial
Right.
and the overlay of where the SPO actually sits, because frankly, the SPO, you're not supposed to put a house on a residential
Right.
parcel in an SPO district. You're supposed to keep it outside of that envelope.
That's right.
So there shouldn't be a lot of homes that are located in the SPO. There shouldn't be a lot of structures in general. That's how it was mapped when we asked George Jenkins to do it, was view sheds, visible from public rights-of-way, not only based on topography, like there was a bunch of different factors that went into modeling
Yep.
that as part of his analysis. And so frankly, there shouldn't be a lot
There
of
shouldn't
homes.
be. My only point is that if there is a house that happens to be in the SPO, that homeowner should be able to put panels on the roof. That's how I feel about that.
And
There's
and
a
so
lot
our
of people.
position was if you're in the SPO, the reason why it's an SPO is because it's a protected viewshed, a corridor that the town has determined is important. So if you have a house that's already located there, cool. Maybe you preceded it, maybe you built it over on, without getting any permission. I'm just saying, there's quite a few of those people. That you should have to go through some kind of site plan review if you're going to put something else on your roof. That was our reasoning.
And the same for the historic preservation overlay, again, because of rural character, that's so fundamental to the comprehensive plan. And the point is that, those are the only districts that we think should be treated specifically because of how restrictive the intent was on those. And so I don't know where we are with the ground mounted, but I certainly know that our intent was on those, the SPO and the HPO, that they should be treated differently.
I think the code kind of requires it in the HPO. It does state that a site plan approval is required for any alteration of any structure, including re-siding, re-roofing, window replacement. I think if you're putting a solar panel on a roof in that situation, that is...
That answers the question.
Yeah, that answers the
right.
question, then. That's the first
So
I'm hearing
that's
about
why,
that.
that's
So
why HPO was not included here. That's why I removed it.
Oh, okay.
In
'Cause you-
the draft, yeah.
Awesome. So
That's why that was.
that addresses that. The only thing for the board to determine is the scenic protection. So what do you guys think? if your house is in the scenic protection, of which there may be up to 202 of them.
Then they should go to the planning board. Is that what you're asking me? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes, they should go to the planning board because the planning board knows the scenic and the historic and the everything else, and they should go there and say, I have a house and I want to do what I want this with it, and they can say, oh, I'm sorry because of blah blah, you can't do it that way, but you may be able to do it this way. That's planning board.
Planning board.
All right, so there we have enough. We need one more for me to shut up.
I think we're all done, right?
What's the last?
What?
Well, we have residential and business.
No, in the SBO.
Just
Site plan or no site plan in the SBO for,
Yeah, no, yeah, SP.
She has it right on her page.
Okay, and the last one was just.
That's it, it's done.
No, what about GM ground
It's
mounted?
fine, site plan approval.
Site
We
plan
already have
approval
that,
across
okay.
the board,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
There's no
great.
objections to that at all.
Okay, cool, then
Okay.
we're done.
We're done.
We're done.
I don't know that you're all done, but we're done.
I think we're done, too.
We're done.
We're not
Outta
done with the
here.
meeting.
No, we
No,
haven't made a
we
motion.
need to know, we need to be clear on the next steps where we move from here.
well,
Because I believe we need to have another public hearing because we substantially changed what we started
I
with.
think at this point, it would make sense, it would be prudent of the board to do that. Right now, there is one section that still, I think, needs a little bit of language work that we can put together, and then what I'll do is once that language is rewritten, I'll input all the changes, and then,
Next meeting, we'll introduce it again?
Yes.
As a local law, we'll set up a public hearing?
correct.
Okay, we're
Sounds good.
there.
I just want to thank the both of you really for your time, your
Yeah, you
energy,
guys have been
your
above and beyond.
patience. Good Lord.
Guys, let me, I mean,
Because it's supposed to say.
there's a great article in The Atlantic about
Everything.
a month and a half ago, and it was about the origins of zoning law in this country. I don't know if you guys read it or not. It's fascinating. I really do recommend that you read it. But basically, zoning law, and I'm not giving you a lecture or anything, but the implications of a lot of the zoning law that have been put into place in like suburban and what used to be rural, unregulated towns that have become second home, like areas for wealthy people. The zoning regulations have kind of conspired to make housing more expensive. There's an entire generation of people who like can't buy houses. That generation is their percentage of home ownership is much lower. And I took my approach on this from that. I just wanted to try to do my best to have the town code reflect something that I believed in. I'm not upset with the outcome because I believe in everybody's vote and representative government, and I do thank you for all your time, and I really do appreciate it.
Quite welcome.
Thank you, Damien.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other public comment? Town board comments?
Wait, we forgot noise law.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Channel 4. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You can add 2.5 more hours.